Cold rain needled Zhang Wei's face, each drop carrying the metallic tang of ozone and blood. He gasped, lungs burning as consciousness slammed into him like a freight train. His body was sprawled across wet asphalt, the chill seeping through cheap synthetic fabric. Above, holographic advertisements flickered in the perpetual twilight of a city that didn't sleep, neon dragons coiled around skyscrapers, corporate logos pulsed with hypnotic rhythm, and somewhere in the distance, the staccato burst of energy weapons echoed through canyon-like streets. A searing pain lanced through his temples. Memories that weren't his own flooded his mind in disjointed fragments. Zhang Wei. Age 22. Transmigrated soul from Earth. Current status, cannon fodder villain in Sector 0 Battle Royale. Fate, executed by Protagonist Li Feng in Chapter 3. Cause of death, lightning soared through the chest during a heroic speech about justice. No, he rasped, pushing himself up on trembling arms. Rainwater pooled in the cracks of the alley, reflecting the sickly green glow from a malfunctioning sign that read, Noodle Heaven, closed permanently. His hands were different, paler, with calluses he didn't recognize. The body was younger, leaner, dressed in standard-issue gray combat fatigues already stained with grime. A holographic screen materialized before his eyes, shimmering with blue light that made his headache worse. System announcement. Sector 0 Battle Royale initiated. Participants, 147/150. Safe zone shrinking in, 60 minutes. Current kill count leader, Berserker Queen, 8 eliminations. Numbers scrolled too fast to follow. Player names, coordinates, ability classifications. Zhang Wei's own name blinked near the bottom of a ranking list, Zhang Wei, unranked. Threat level, minimal. Predicted survival time, 2.7 hours. 2.7 hours. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed at his throat. He remembered the novel now, the trashy web serial he'd been reading before falling asleep at his desk. The protagonist was an edgy loner named Li Feng who gained power through righteous suffering. The villains were disposable obstacles, their deaths serving as power-ups for the hero's journey. And Zhang Wei's character. The first-named villain to die, a speed bump on Li Feng's path to greatness. Think, he whispered to himself, rain plastering hair to his forehead. You know the plot. You know the characters. But knowledge alone wouldn't save him. In the novel, his character had tried to ambush Li Feng with a stolen energy pistol. The hero had sensed the attack, deflected the shot with his lightning sword, and delivered a monologue about the corruption of cowardice before executing him. Clean. Efficient. Forgettable. A scream cut through the rain, followed by the wet crunch of breaking bone. Zhang Wei flattened himself against the alley wall, peering around the corner. 3 blocks down, a kill squad moved with military precision. For players in matching tactical armor, their faces obscured by helmets that glowed with targeting reticles. They surrounded a younger player who'd been hiding behind a dumpster. The leader, a woman with a voice modulator that made her sound like grinding gears, spoke without emotion. Surrender your inventory. We'll make it quick. The hiding player tried to run. A net of crackling energy wrapped around his legs, and the squad opened fire with suppressed rifles that made soft whip sounds. The body hit the ground with a finality that made Zhang Wei's stomach clench. They looted the corpse in seconds, taking a backpack and what looked like a medical kit. Then they moved on, disappearing into the maze of alleys like shadows. This wasn't a game. This was slaughterhouse efficiency. Zhang Wei's hands found something metallic in the puddle beside him, a length of broken pipe, rusted at one end, the other jagged where it had been torn from some forgotten infrastructure. He gripped it, the cold metal biting into his palm. It was better than nothing. As he stood, another notification flashed in his peripheral vision. Minimap acquired, stolen protocol. Functionality, 73%. Displaying player density and safe zone boundaries. A translucent map overlay appeared, showing the city grid. Red dots clustered in certain areas, the kill squads hunting in packs. A pulsing blue circle marked the safe zone, already shrinking from the outer edges inward. He was near the border. In 40 minutes, this alley would be outside the safe area, and the system would, he didn't know what would happen, but the novel had described it as terminal environmental recalibration. Not survivable. He needed to move. Now. Zhang Wei crept from the alley, keeping low behind abandoned hover cars and collapsed scaffolding. The city was a monument to decay beneath its neon veneer, broken windows stared like empty eye sockets, graffiti warnings marked territories of dead gangs, and the air smelled of ozone, wet concrete, and a coppery hint of recent violence. His stolen minimap showed a cluster of green dots ahead, neutral players, maybe. Or a trap. He changed direction, heading toward what looked like a less populated sector. That's when he heard it. The ground shook with each footfall. Not the rhythmic patter of rain, but the deliberate, earth-trembling steps of something massive. Zhang Wei ducked behind a collapsed billboard just as the thing rounded the corner. It wasn't a machine, though it moved like one. A player, but transformed, 8 feet tall, muscles bulging beneath plates of magically reinforced armor that glowed with faint runes. The helmet was faceless, smooth obsidian, but the chest plate bore a hand-painted insignia, a fist crushing a mountain. The ironclad brute, one of the early game mini-bosses from the novel. In the story, Li Feng had defeated him in Chapter 2 to acquire the Titan's Resilience skill. And the brute was charging straight toward Zhang Wei's hiding spot. There was no hesitation, no dramatic pause. The brute raised a fist the size of a cinder block, and the air hummed with gathering force. Zhang Wei's body moved on instinct, he dove sideways as the fist came down, shattering concrete where he'd been standing. Rain and debris sprayed his face. He scrambled backward, pipe raised in a pathetic defensive stance. The brute turned, faceless helmet tilting. A voice emerged, distorted and deep. Weak signal. Easy points. It lunged again, faster than something that size should move. Zhang Wei rolled, feeling the wind of a passing swing that clipped his shoulder and sent him spinning. Pain blossomed hot and bright, dislocated, maybe broken. He stumbled against a wall, gasping. This was it. This was how he died, not in Chapter 3 to the protagonist, but in some nameless alley to a random brute. The irony would have been funny if you weren't about to be pulped. The brute raised both fists this time, preparing for a crushing overhead blow that would turn bone to paste. And then something clicked in Zhang Wei's mind. Not a sound, but a sensation, like a key turning in a lock he hadn't known existed. His vision shifted, the world overlaying with translucent golden text that scrolled across his field of view. Plot glitch scanner activated. Target, ironclad brute, player ID, Grimdal. Analyzing. For a fraction of a second, time seemed to slow. The rain hung in the air like crystal beads. The brute's descending fists moved through syrup. Text resolved before his eyes, crisp and clinical. Weakness identified, magically resonant point. Location, posterior left knee, 2.3 centimeters lateral to patellar tendon. Effect, impact disrupts armor's resonance field for 8 to 12 seconds. Origin, improper enchantment synchronization during armor forging. Psychological note, player compensates for weakness with overaggressive frontal assaults. The information flooded him, not just words, but understanding. He could see it now, a faint pulsing glow behind the brute's left knee, visible only through this new sense. A flaw in the magical matrix, a single point of failure in an otherwise impenetrable defense. The brute's fists came down. Zhang Wei didn't dodge. Instead, he dropped into a crouch, letting the blow pass over him so close he felt the vibration in his teeth. The fists cratered the wall behind him, sending cracked spiderwebbing up 3 stories. Before the brute could recover, Zhang Wei moved. He didn't think, his body acted on the scanner's information. He lunged forward, not away, slipping inside the brute's guard as the massive arms were still extended from the mist strike. His injured shoulder screamed in protest, but he ignored it, driving the jagged end of the pipe toward that glowing point behind the left knee. The brute tried to twist, but its own momentum worked against it. The armor was thick there, but the scanner's information showed exactly where to strike, not the center of the kneecap, but slightly to the side, at a precise angle. The pipe connected. There was no dramatic explosion. Just a sound like 1,000 panes of glass cracking at once, crystalline and sharp. The runes on the brute's armor flickered, died, then flashed brilliant white before shattering into motes of fading light. The armor didn't just deactivate, it disintegrated. Plates fell away like dead leaves, revealing a surprisingly ordinary man beneath, pale and wide-eyed in a sweat-soaked undersuit. The player, Grimdal, according to the scanner, stumbled, his left leg buckling as the supporting magic vanished. He crashed to one knee, confusion etched across a face that had probably never known vulnerability inside that shell. What, how? Zhang Wei didn't wait for the question to finish. He brought the pipe around in a clumsy swing that connected with the man's temple. Not enough to kill, the scanner showed vitals, and he wasn't a murderer, but enough to drop him unconscious into the growing puddle. The scanner updated. Target neutralized. Armor disabled, 10 seconds remaining. Recommendation, disengage. Zhang Wei ran. He didn't look back, didn't check for loot. His heart hammered against his ribs, each beat screaming alive, alive, alive. He slipped through a broken fence, across a deserted plaza where holographic advertisements still cheerfully promoted products for a world that no longer existed here, and into the relative cover of a partially collapsed transit tunnel. Only then did he stop, leaning against damp concrete, breathing in ragged gasps. Rainwater dripped from the ceiling in steady rhythm. His shoulder throbbed with each pulse. He'd done it. He'd survived an encounter that should have killed him. Not through strength or skill, but through knowledge. The scanner had given him what the novel never did, a chance. But as his breathing slowed, a new realization settled over him. The scanner hadn't just shown the brute's weakness. It had shown everything, the improper enchantment, the psychological compensation. It had laid the player bare in ways that went beyond physical vulnerabilities. This wasn't just a combat aid. This was intimate violation. And if he could see these things about others, what stopped someone from seeing them about him? A flicker on his stolen minimap caught his attention. A single red dot, stationary, high up. Rooftop across from the plaza he'd just crossed. It hadn't been there 30 seconds ago. Zhang Wei froze, pressing himself deeper into the tunnel's shadows. On the rooftop 400 meters away, Li Feng lowered the sniper scope from his eye. Rain beaded on the lens, but the thermal signature had been clear enough, a player moving with the frantic energy of prey who just escaped a predator. Interesting. The system had identified the target as Zhang Wei, minimal threat. But minimal threats didn't take down ironclad brutes with improvised weapons. They didn't move with that particular blend of panic and precision. Li Feng's fingers brushed the hilt of the sword at his hip. The blade remained quiet, no lightning crackling along its length. Not a worthy opponent yet. But perhaps, a curious anomaly. He raised the scope again, finding the tunnel entrance where the thermal signature had disappeared. The crosshair hovered over the darkness, steady despite the wind and rain. A cold smile touched his lips, there and gone like a shadow passing over stone. Interesting prey, he whispered, the words swallowed by the storm. Then he was gone, melting back into the rooftop's machinery, leaving only the fading impression of where he'd stood and the certainty that, somewhere in the city below, a game had just changed in ways the system hadn't anticipated. The derelict subway station smelled of rust and decay. Zhang Wei pressed his back against a cracked ceramic tile wall, his breathing shallow and controlled. Rainwater dripped from the ceiling in steady, rhythmic plinks, forming brackish puddles on the grimy concrete floor. In his hands, the stolen minimap glowed softly, displaying the shrinking safe zone boundary, a pulsating blue ring that now left him with 40 minutes until contraction. He had chosen this place for its labyrinthine tunnels and multiple exits, but the silence was beginning to feel oppressive. The only sounds were the distant rumble of the city above and the occasional skitter of unseen things in the shadows. His broken pipe, still stained with the residue of Grimdal's shattered armor, felt heavy in his grip. Then he heard it, the faintest scrape of metal on concrete, so subtle it could have been mistaken for dripping water. Zhang Wei froze, his eyes scanning the vaulted ceiling 30 feet above. The station's architecture was a relic of better times, with ornate ironwork now corroded and support beams sagging under decades of neglect. Something moved up there, a shadow detaching itself from the darkness. His plot glitch scanner, activated without conscious thought, information flooding his mind like cold water pouring into his skull. Silent blade. Class, stealth assassin. Primary weapons, twin poison daggers, neurotoxin, paralysis in 30 seconds. Exploitable weakness, crippling mysophobia, fear of germs and filth. Exposure to contaminants triggers paralyzing anxiety and compulsive cleaning behavior. Additional data, hunts by sound isolation, prefers ambush from elevated positions, breathing pattern reveals position every 7.3 seconds. The scanner's information came with perfect clarity, as if he'd always known these facts. No resource cost, no activation time, just instant, brutal understanding. Zhang Wei's mind raced even as his body remained perfectly still. Mysophobia. A fear of germs. In this filth-encrusted tomb of a subway station, he stood in a treasure trove of triggers. Another scrape, closer this time. He could see the shape now, a lithe figure clad in dark, form-fitting armor that seemed to drink the dim light. Silent blade moved with unnatural grace, clinging to the ceiling beams like some predatory insect. Twin daggers gleamed with a sickly green sheen where they caught the faint light filtering through broken skylights. Zhang Wei calculated distances. The tracks were 10 feet to his left, a sunken trench filled with decades of accumulated grime, oily water, and unidentifiable debris. He'd have to move fast. Silent blade dropped. It wasn't a fall, it was a controlled descent, the assassin twisting in mid-air to land silently on the balls of his feet. The movement was so fluid it seemed to defy physics. Zhang Wei caught a glimpse of a featureless black mask before the daggers came for him in a blur of motion. He didn't try to block. Instead, he dove toward the tracks, hitting the ground in a roll that coated his clothes in filth. The poison daggers whistled through the air where his throat had been a second before. Zhang Wei came up with a handful of the track debris, a wet, clumping mass of mud, rust flakes, and something that smelled faintly of decay. "Your hands are dirty," Zhang Wei said, his voice calm despite the adrenaline screaming through his veins. Silent blade froze. Not from any attack, but from the words themselves. The assassin's head tilted slightly, and through the mask's eye slits, Zhang Wei saw the exact moment the realization hit. The scanner's information had been precise, this wasn't just a dislike of dirt. This was pathological terror. "Look at them," Zhang Wei continued, holding up his own filthy hand. "Covered in bacteria. Mold spores. Decades of human waste washed down here by the rain. You can almost feel it crawling on your skin, can't you?" Silent blade took a step back, the daggers trembling slightly. The assassin's breathing, previously imperceptible, became audible, short, panicked gasps. Zhang Wei threw the handful of grime. It wasn't a powerful throw, but it didn't need to be. The clump of filth arced through the air and splattered against Silent Blade's chest plate. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the assassin let out a choked sound that was half gasp, half sob. The daggers clattered to the concrete as Silent Blade's hands flew to his chest, fingers scrabbling at the contamination. The movements were frantic, compulsive, scrubbing at armor that couldn't possibly be cleaned by hand. The assassin dropped to his knees, pulling at the fastenings of his chest plate with trembling fingers, muttering something about sterilization and contamination protocols. Zhang Wei didn't wait. He scooped up the fallen daggers, careful to grip them by the handles, avoiding the poisoned blades, and backed away. Silent Blade was completely lost to the phobia now, tearing at his own armor as if it were crawling with invisible pathogens. As he retreated into a maintenance tunnel, Zhang Wei began cataloging the weaknesses in his mind, creating mental files for each player he might encounter. 1. Grimdao, magical resonance point behind left knee, confirmed. 2. Silent Blade, mysophobia, sound-based hunting pattern, confirmed. 3. Li Feng, unknown, scanner hadn't triggered during rooftop observation. 4. Others, to be discovered. The pattern was becoming clear. The plot glitch scanner didn't reveal combat weaknesses in the traditional sense. It exposed the cracks in people's psyches, the hidden fractures that turned invincible warriors into vulnerable wrecks. A childhood fear here, a traumatic memory there, these were the true weak points in this battle royale. The maintenance tunnel led to an abandoned control room, its windows shattered and consoles dark. Zhang Wei checked the minimap again. The safe zone contraction was now at 35 minutes. He had time, but he needed to. A crackling sound filled the air, followed by a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. It was synthetic, genderless, and utterly cold. Announcement: Player Zhang Wei has been identified as an anomaly. Zhang Wei's blood ran cold. Bounty: 500 points for elimination. Coordinates have been broadcast to all remaining players. He stared at the minimap in his hands. Dozens of red dots appeared across the display, like blood blooming in water. They converged from all directions, north, south, east, west, moving with purpose toward his location. Some moved fast, others slow and methodical, but all were coming for him. 500 points. That would be enough to buy survival gear, weapons, maybe even immunity from the next safe zone contraction. For players struggling at the bottom of the rankings, he'd just become the most valuable target in the game. Zhang Wei's mind raced through options. Hide. They had his coordinates. Run. They were coming from all sides. Fight. Against dozens of players, many undoubtedly stronger than Grimdal or Silent Blade. Then he looked at the 2 poisoned daggers in his hands, then at the minimap showing the approaching hunters, and a grim smile touched his lips. They thought he was prey. They thought the bounty made him vulnerable. They didn't understand that he now held the whispers of their weaknesses in his mind, and in this game of hunters and hunted, knowledge was the deadliest weapon of all. The first red dot reached the subway station entrance above. Then another. And another. Zhang Wei took a deep breath, tightened his grip on the broken pipe, and prepared to teach them just how expensive 500 points could be. Rainwater dripped from shattered fluorescent lights, pooling on the cracked linoleum floor of what had once been a corporate office. Zhang Wei pressed his back against a water-stained cubicle wall, his breathing shallow and controlled. The stolen mini-map in his hand glowed faintly, showing dozens of red dots converging on this sector, and one particularly bright marker closing in from the stairwell. He'd miscalculated. The crumbling office building had seemed like perfect cover, with multiple escape routes and sightlines to monitor approaching threats. But the bounty broadcast had turned the entire district into a hunting ground. He'd watched from a third-floor window as players tore through the streets below, some fighting each other, others scanning building entrances with predatory focus. A metallic screech echoed through the floor. Zhang Wei froze. That wasn't the sound of structural collapse, it was the sound of a door being torn from its hinges, 3 floors below. He checked the mini-map again. The bright marker was moving with impossible speed, bypassing the main stairwell entirely. Through the scanner's passive awareness, he felt the approaching presence like static electricity raising the hairs on his arms. He had to move. Now. Zhang Wei pushed away from the cubicle and sprinted toward the emergency exit at the far end of the floor. His boots splashed through puddles of rainwater that had seeped through the collapsed ceiling. The broken pipe in his other hand felt pathetically inadequate, but it was all he had. He was halfway across the open-plan office when the window behind him exploded inward. Not with the shattering of glass, but with a silent, precise disintegration, as if the material had simply decided to cease existing. Zhang Wei threw himself behind an overturned desk as shards of what had been tempered glass turned to crystalline dust mid-air, swirling in a vortex of displaced air. Through the new opening stepped Li Feng. The protagonist landed gracefully on the soaked carpet, his black combat boots making no sound. Rainwater streamed from his dark hair, plastering it to his forehead, but his eyes remained dry and focused. In his right hand, the lightning sword crackled with blue-white energy, illuminating the ruined office with stark, flickering shadows. The weapon hummed with a low-frequency vibration that made Zhang Wei's teeth ache. "Found you," Li Feng said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. Zhang Wei remained crouched behind the desk, his mind racing. The scanner hadn't activated yet, the cheat worked on proximity and threat assessment. He needed Li Feng to engage, to commit to the kill. Only then would the weakness reveal itself. "You're the anomaly," Li Feng continued, taking a step forward. His movements were economical, predatory. "The system flagged you. Usually, anomalies are glitches, data corruption, failed spawns. But you're different. You think." Zhang Wei stayed silent, calculating angles. The emergency exit was 20 meters away, past 3 rows of cubicles. Li Feng stood between him and that escape route. The windows were his only other option, but they were on the 3rd floor, a survivable fall with proper technique, but it would cost him. "Most players fight with strength or skill," Li Feng said, his sword rising to a ready position. Blue arcs of electricity danced along the blade, casting jagged shadows across his face. "They rely on their classes, their abilities. But you don't fight at all. You manipulate. You exploit." Another step closer. Zhang Wei could feel the ozone smell of the lightning sword now, sharp and metallic. "The weak cling to tricks because they lack true power," Li Feng's voice dropped to a whisper that carried through the rain-soaked room. "This battle royale exists to separate the strong from the weak. To purify the gene pool of combatants. And your contamination." Zhang Wei's scanner activated. It wasn't like with Grimdal or Silent Blade, those had been tactical weaknesses, physical flaws. This was different. The information flooded his consciousness not as a combat analysis, but as a narrative fragment, a buried memory that shouldn't have been accessible. Li Feng, hidden guilt complex regarding betrayal of mentor Old Man Chen. Trigger phrase, Old Man Chen would be ashamed, induces emotional breakdown, power disruption for 8 to 12 seconds. Secondary effect, memory flashbacks create sensory overload. Warning, post-recovery aggression increases by 300%. Li Feng raised his lightning sword. The weapon's hum intensified, becoming a shriek of gathering energy. Blue-white light reflected in his eyes, making them look like chips of Arctic ice. Cleansing the weak isn't just duty, Li Feng said, his voice taking on a ceremonial tone. It's mercy. You'll never have to fear the shrinking zone again. You'll never have to watch your back. Consider this a gift. Old man Chen would be ashamed. Zhang Wei shouted the words with every ounce of conviction he could muster. The effect was instantaneous. Li Feng froze mid-swing, his body going rigid. The lightning sword flickered violently, the blue-white energy sputtering like a dying neon sign. For a heartbeat, the weapon's glow died completely, plunging the office into near darkness save for the gray rainlight through broken windows. Then Li Feng's knees buckled. He didn't collapse so much as fold, dropping to one knee as if struck by a physical blow. The lightning sword clattered to the floor, its energy completely extinguished. Li Feng's hands came up to clutch at his head, fingers digging into his temples. No, he whispered, the word torn from somewhere deep and wounded. Not again. Zhang Wei didn't wait to see more. He was already moving, sprinting past the paralyzed protagonist toward the nearest window. As he passed Li Feng, he caught a glimpse of the man's face, eyes wide with something that wasn't pain, but horror. Raw, unprocessed memory horror. The scanner had been right. This wasn't just a weakness, it was a trauma. Zhang Wei reached the window, a floor-to-ceiling pane of glass that had miraculously survived the building's decay. He didn't slow down. Instead, he turned his shoulder toward the glass, raised the broken pipe as a makeshift shield for his face, and threw his weight forward. The window exploded outward in a shower of fragments. For a moment, Zhang Wei hung in empty air, 3 stories above the rain-slicked pavement below. The minimap slipped from his grip, tumbling away into the darkness. Then gravity took him. He hit the ground in a controlled roll, letting his body absorb the impact along his shoulder and back. Even with proper technique, the fall drove the air from his lungs in a painful gasp. Something in his left ankle twisted with a sickening pop, sending white-hot pain shooting up his leg. Stamina. The scanner had warned about stamina cost. He'd sacrificed a chunk of it just to survive. Zhang Wei pushed himself to his feet, ignoring the screaming protest from his ankle. He had to keep moving. Li Feng would recover, and when he did. A roar of pure, undiluted fury echoed from the broken window above. Zhang Wei looked up. Li Feng stood framed in the shattered opening, his face a mask of rage so intense it seemed to warp the air around him. Rain streamed down his features, but his eyes burned with a light that had nothing to do with lightning. Zhang Wei. The name wasn't shouted, it was torn from Li Feng's throat, raw and bloody. I see you now. I see your coward soul. Li Feng raised his right hand, palm outward. Blood dripped from where he'd cut it on the broken glass, mixing with the rain. He smeared the blood across his own forehead in a crude, savage gesture. By my blood, I swear this oath. Li Feng's voice carried over the pounding rain, echoing through the empty streets. No safe zone will hide you. No trick will save you. I will hunt you through fire and ruin. I will peel the secrets from your flesh. The blood on his forehead began to glow with a faint crimson light. It pulsed once, twice, then solidified into an intricate, glowing sigil that hovered just above his skin. On the pavement below, Zhang Wei felt a sudden, invasive presence settle over him. It was like being dipped in fluorescent paint, a sensation of being marked, tagged, made visible. He looked down at his own hands. Nothing had changed physically, but he could feel it, a tracking signal, broadcasting his location to Li Feng alone. On the 3rd floor, Li Feng's eyes locked onto him. The crimson sigil pulsed in time with Zhang Wei's own heartbeat. The hunt begins now, Li Feng whispered, though the words carried with unnatural clarity. Run, anomaly. Run until your legs break. I'll be right behind you. Then he stepped backward into the darkness of the ruined office, disappearing from view. Zhang Wei didn't need to be told twice. He turned and limped into the rain-drenched alleyways, his injured ankle screaming with every step. The tracking signal pulsed against his awareness like a second heartbeat, a constant, inescapable reminder that the protagonist had just become something far more dangerous. He'd survived the fated death scene. But in doing so, he'd turned a story beat into a personal vendetta. And now Li Feng wasn't just following the plot anymore. He was writing a new one, with Zhang Wei's blood as the ink. Blood dripped from Zhang Wei's torn sleeve as he stumbled through the rain-slicked streets, each breath burning in his chest. The mini-map in his hand glowed with a constellation of red dots, bounty hunters converging from 3 directions, drawn by the 500-point prize on his head. His ankle throbbed where he'd landed wrong, escaping Li Feng, a persistent ache that threatened to buckle his leg with every other step. 32 minutes until safe zone contraction, the system voice chimed in his mind, cheerful as a funeral director. He ducked into an alley, pressing against damp brick as two hunters rushed past, a woman with flaming hair and a man whose skin shimmered like mercury. Their conversation floated back to him. Signal's weak but he's close. The protagonist wants him alive for the execution. Li Feng's gone rabid. Put a personal mark on him. Zhang Wei waited until their footsteps faded, then limped toward a towering structure ahead. The central library, according to the faded sign above neo-Gothic arches. Its windows were mostly shattered, but the stone walls offered better cover than the open plaza he'd been crossing. Inside, the air smelled of mildew and old paper. Moonlight filtered through broken skylights, illuminating floating dust motes and mountains of toppled shelves. He moved between shadows, his broken pipe held ready. The mini-map showed one red dot stationary on the second floor, not moving toward him, just waiting. He found the staircase, each creaking step a potential death sentence. On the mezzanine level, he saw her. A woman stood before a stained-glass window depicting some forgotten scholar, her back to him. Crystals floated around her in a lazy orbit, each gem catching the moonlight and refracting it into prismatic patterns on the walls. She wore practical combat gear but with artistic flourishes, crystal embroidery on the sleeves, a necklace of amethyst shards. Her fingers traced the air, and the crystals responded, shifting formation. Zhang Wei's plot glitch scanner activated without conscious thought. Information flooded his mind, Crystal Mage. Real name, Lin Mei. Age, 24. Powers, crystal-based defensive and offensive magic. Weakness, all magic channels through sentimental locket containing portrait of deceased younger sister. Destroy locket equals nullify magic for 24 hours. Psychological profile, overconfident due to early successes, secretly terrified of failing to protect others as she failed her sister. In the original novel, she died in Chapter 7, ambushed while showing off her barrier skills to impress other players. Zhang Wei weighed his options. He could shatter the locket from here with a well-thrown piece of debris, disable her, maybe steal whatever supplies she carried. But the mini-map showed 3 hunters closing on the library's east entrance. His ankle wouldn't let him outrun them. Don't turn around, he said, keeping his voice low but clear. The crystals whirled instantly, forming a defensive sphere around her. She didn't turn, but her posture stiffened. Who's there? Someone who knows your weakness. That made her turn. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, scanning the shadows until they found him. The crystals reoriented, points aimed at his position. Reveal yourself. Zhang Wei stepped into a patch of moonlight, keeping his hands visible. The locket around your neck. It's not just sentimental. It's your power focus. Her hand flew to the silver locket, fingers closing protectively around it. The crystals trembled. How could you possibly? I know things, he interrupted. I also know there are 3 hunters about to come through that east door. One's a pyrokinetic, one has metal skin, third I didn't get a good look at. They're after me, but they'll kill you just for being here. And you're telling me this why? Because I'm offering a truce. Temporary alliance. You help me survive the next 20 minutes, I'll tell you exactly how to protect that locket from every common attack pattern in this game. Her eyes narrowed. You expect me to believe you won't just break it yourself the moment I lower my guard? If I wanted you dead, you'd already be disarmed. He gestured with his chin toward a fallen marble bust near her feet. One good throw at the right angle, the chain snaps, your magic fails. But I didn't. The library's front doors crashed open downstairs. Shouts echoed up the stairwell. They're here, a male voice yelled. Second floor heat signature. Lin Mei, Crystal Mage, made her decision in the space between heartbeats. The crystals around her expanded, forming a shimmering barrier that covered both herself and Zhang Wei. Terms. You defend, I direct. Protect the locket above all else. Don't let them flank us. And what do you bring to this alliance? A map of their weaknesses. Footsteps pounded up the stairs. The pyrokinetic woman appeared first, her hair literally aflame, casting dancing shadows across the bookcases. Behind her came the metallic-skinned man, his arms reshaping into blade-like extensions. The third hunter hung back, a lanky figure with too many joints, clinging to the ceiling like an insect. There, the pyrokinetic shouted. The anomaly and his new friend. Fire erupted from her hands, a torrent of orange and blue that slammed against Lin Mei's crystal barrier. The crystals glowed red-hot but held, refracting the heat into harmless rainbows. The temperature in the room spiked. Zhang Wei's scanner fed him data as he crouched behind the barrier. Pyrokinetic, weakness, her power requires constant oxygen intake through specialized lung implants. Disrupt breathing pattern equals flame sputter. Metallic man, weakness, skin transformation causes extreme sensitivity to rapid temperature changes. Thermal shock equals brittle fractures. Ceiling crawler, weakness, arachnid adaptation creates pressure point cluster at base of spine. Impact there equals temporary paralysis. Metal skin first. Zhang Wei called to Lin Mei. Rapid cooling after the heat. She understood instantly. As the pyrokinetic unleashed another fireblast, Lin Mei didn't just block, she focused 3 crystals to capture and concentrate the thermal energy into a searing beam, then redirected it at the metallic man. The man raised his blade arms to block, confident in his durability. The superheated air hit him, and for a second nothing happened. Then his metallic surface glowed cherry red. Now the opposite. Zhang Wei yelled. Lin Mei summoned moisture from the humid air, condensing it into ice crystals that she hurled at the glowing metal. The thermal shock was audible, a sharp cracking sound like breaking glass. The metallic man screamed as fissures appeared across his arms and chest. He stumbled back, his transformation unraveling into normal, bleeding flesh. The pyrokinetic roared in anger, sucking in a deep breath for a bigger attack. Zhang Wei spotted the tell, the slight bulge at her throat where the implants were. Her throat. Disrupt her breathing. Lin Mei didn't have a direct attack ready, but she was clever. She shattered one of her smaller crystals into dust-fine particles and used a gust of wind magic to blow it directly into the pyrokinetic's open mouth. The woman choked, her fire sputtering out as she coughed violently. The crystal dust wouldn't seriously harm her, but the reflexive gagging broke her concentration completely. The ceiling crawler chose that moment to strike. He dropped silently behind them, multiple limbs poised to impale. Zhang Wei saw him in the reflective surface of a crystal. Behind. Base of the spine. Lin Mei whirled, but too slow. The crawler's limb shot toward her back, aimed not at her body, but at the locket chain. He'd been listening. Zhang Wei moved without thinking. He lunged, shoving Lin Mei aside. The crawler's barbed limb grazed his shoulder instead, tearing through fabric and flesh. White-hot pain exploded down his arm, but he kept moving, swinging his broken pipe in a desperate arc. The pipe connected with the crawler's lower back, not a powerful blow, but perfectly placed. The creature shuddered, its multiple limbs going limp. It dropped from the ceiling, twitching on the floor. The metallic man was down, bleeding and moaning. The pyrokinetic was still coughing up crystal dust. The crawler paralyzed. But more red dots appeared on the minimap, reinforcements. "We need to go," Zhang Wei gasped, clutching his bleeding shoulder. Lin Mei looked at him, at the wound he'd taken saving her locket. Her expression shifted from calculated alliance to something warmer. "You're bleeding badly. Medkit in my pack. Not much left." She helped him to a relatively clear space behind the circulation desk. Zhang Wei fumbled with his pack, pulling out the last 2 medkits, small pouches of healing gel and bandages. He applied one to his shoulder, the cool gel numbing the pain almost instantly. The wound began knitting itself closed at visible speed. "Your turn," he said, nodding at a cut on her forearm where a crystal shard had ricocheted. "It's minor. In this game, minor becomes fatal." He tossed her the second medkit. "Use it." She did, then looked at him curiously. "Why warn me about the locket? You could have taken me out, taken my supplies, run." "Because I'm tired of being alone," Zhang Wei said, and it was the truth. "And because the strong picking off the weak is what this game wants. It's what Li Feng believes in. I'm trying something different." "Li Feng." Her eyes widened. "The protagonist marked you. Personal vendetta. He has a tracking skill on me now." Zhang Wei showed her the minimap, where a distinct gold dot pulsed amid the red ones, Li Feng, still several blocks away but moving steadily closer. "Then we have minutes at best." Lin Mei stood, her crystals reforming their orbit. "I know a place. Sub-basement of the old bank vault. Radiation shielding blocks most tracking skills. Lead the way." They moved through the library's back passages, Lin Mei using her crystals to silently melt through a locked service door. As they descended into maintenance tunnels, Zhang Wei felt the strange camaraderie of shared survival. She hadn't asked how he knew about the locket. He hadn't explained the scanner. Some truths were better left in the dark. They emerged in a narrow alley behind the library, the rain now a fine mist. The safe zone timer ticked down to 5 minutes. Across the street stood the bank building, its vault supposedly intact. That's when the world glitched. First, the rain stopped in mid-air, droplets hanging like frozen glass beads. Then the color drained from everything, the neon signs, the wet pavement, their own skin and clothing, all fading to grayscale. Sound cut out completely, leaving a vacuum silence that pressed against their eardrums. The safe zone boundary, usually an invisible line, became visible as a wall of shimmering distortion. It contracted not gradually but violently, snapping inward like a rubber band. Buildings at the edge pixelated and dissolved into nothingness. Zhang Wei's minimap flickered, then displayed a system message in pulsing crimson text. Game Master intervention detected. Anomaly Zhang Wei flagged for deletion. Customized hunter deployed, the blank slate. Immunity to weakness scans confirmed. Elimination protocol, immediate. Then, as suddenly as it began, the glitch ended. Color and sound rushed back. The rain fell again. The safe zone had shrunk by 3 blocks, putting the bank vault right at the new edge. But standing between them and the vault entrance was a figure. Tall, androgynous, wearing featureless gray armor that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. No weapons visible. No identifying marks. The blank slate simply stood there, head tilted as if studying them like specimens under glass. Lin Mei's crystals formed a defensive array, but her voice trembled. I'm not reading any energy signature. No thermal, no magical resonance. Nothing. Zhang Wei's plot glitch scanner activated automatically, and returned empty. No weaknesses. No psychological profile. No power descriptions. Just a single line, data insufficient. Target construct has no recorded flaws. For the first time since awakening in this nightmare, Zhang Wei felt true, ice-cold fear. His cheat, the one thing that had kept him alive through Grim Dao, Silent Blade, Evenly Feng, was useless. The blank slate took a step forward, and the pavement cracked beneath its foot not from weight, but from something far more fundamental, the negation of reality itself. The radiation-shielded bank vault door groaned as Zhang Wei forced it open, the metal protesting against his shoulder injury. Lin Mei, Crystal Mage, stood beside him, her fingers tracing the locket at her throat. The safe zone contraction had been violent, a sudden compression that left them blinking in the dim emergency lighting of what appeared to be an abandoned shopping mall. Central Plaza Mall, Zhang Wei muttered, reading the faded sign above a shattered fountain. Safe zone radius, 1 city block. Time remaining, 27 minutes. The minimap on his wrist display showed their position as a pulsing blue dot at the mall center. Dozens of red dots surrounded them, converging from all directions. The bounty on his head, 500 points, had turned the entire arena into a hunting ground. Lin Mei's presence beside him was both comfort and liability. She was powerful, but her magic was tied to that locket, a vulnerability he'd chosen not to exploit. We need to move, she said, her voice calm but edged with tension. The Game Master's hunter, the blank slate, could be anywhere. Zhang Wei nodded, his ankle still throbbing from the 3-story fall in Chapter 3. The plot glitch scanner hummed in his mind, a constant passive awareness that had saved him twice already. As they crept past a looted electronics store, the scanner pinged, not a weakness, but a presence. Multiple hostiles, approaching from the north entrance. One is, different. Before he could elaborate, the mall's glass atrium exploded inward. A woman burst through the cascading shards, her form wreathed in a crimson aura that crackled with palpable fury. She stood nearly 7 feet tall, muscles corded beneath leather armor, a double-headed axe glowing with the same angry light as her eyes. The scanner instantly fed Zhang Wei the information, Berserker Queen. Top ranker. Rage aura fueled by childhood abandonment trauma. Exploitable weakness, real name Lily. Calling her by this name induces emotional paralysis. Found you, anomaly, she roared, her voice shaking dust from the ceiling. The bounty is mine. Lin Mei reacted first, raising her hands. Crystals sprouted from the cracked tile floor, forming a jagged wall between them and the charging berserker. The axe came down, shearing through the crystal barrier as if it were paper. Shards flew, glittering in the emergency lights. Her rage enhances physical strength exponentially, Zhang Wei said, ducking behind a toppled clothing rack. We can't outfight her. The Berserker Queen laughed, a sound like grinding stones. Hiding? Pathetic. I'll peel the flesh from your bones. She swung again, cleaving a support column in half. The ceiling above groaned, raining plaster. Zhang Wei's mind raced. The scanner's insight was clear: use the name, trigger the trauma. But timing was everything. He needed her close, distracted, vulnerable. Lin, keep her busy. Aim for the axe haft. Crystal Mage nodded, her locket glowing with a soft blue light. She wove her hands through the air, and crystalline spikes shot from the ground, aiming not at the berserker's body but at her weapon. The queen batted them aside with contemptuous ease, but each deflection cost her a fraction of focus. You think crystals can stop me? She bellowed, charging again. Her rage aura flared, heating the air around her. I've crushed players with 10 times your power. Zhang Wei rolled from cover, his injured shoulder screaming in protest. He needed to get within earshot, to make the words land with precision. The scanner provided more detail as he watched her fight: childhood memory, abandoned at age 6 by mother at a bus station. Named Lily was engraved on a locket she wore, same locket was torn away during abandonment. Trigger phrase must reference maternal rejection. The axe whistled toward his head. He dove, feeling the wind of its passage tear at his clothes. Lin Mei created a crystal platform beneath his feet, boosting him upward as the axe embedded itself in the floor where he'd been standing. Now. She was momentarily off balance, wrenching her weapon free. Zhang Wei landed 5 feet away, meeting her furious gaze. He didn't shout, he spoke clearly, coldly, letting each syllable carry through the dusty air. Lily. The berserker froze. Not physically, but emotionally, her eyes widened, the rage aura flickered. What did you call me? Your mother never wanted you, Zhang Wei continued, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow cut through the mall's echoes. She left you at that bus station with nothing but a name you've been running from ever since. The effect was instantaneous. The crimson aura snuffed out like a candle in a storm. The Berserker Queen, Lily, staggered, her axe slipping from suddenly limp fingers. Tears welled in her eyes, not of anger but of raw, childhood pain. She clutched at her chest where a locket might have once hung. How do you know that? Lin Mei didn't hesitate. With a sharp gesture, she summoned a single, needle-thin crystal spike and drove it into the axe's glowing haft. The weapon, deprived of its rage-fueled magic, shattered into dull metal fragments. Go, Zhang Wei said to the weeping woman. The bounty isn't worth this. She didn't move, paralyzed by memory. They left her there, kneeling amidst the ruins of her own power. As they retreated deeper into the mall, Zhang Wei felt the scanner's presence shift in his mind. It wasn't just revealing weaknesses now, it was offering context, deeper layers. Scanner note: repeated use enhances analytical depth. Psychological profiles now include memory fragments and trigger efficacy ratings. He filed that away, knowledge was his only real weapon. They reached a service corridor behind a shuttered food court. Lin Mei leaned against the wall, breathing heavily. That was brutal. Survival is brutal, Zhang Wei replied, checking his minimap. The red dots were closer now, drawn by the sounds of combat. But we have a bigger problem. He pointed upward. Hovering near the shattered atrium skylight was a sleek, black surveillance drone, its single red lens fixed on them. It made no sound, but its presence was a cold weight in the air. In a sterile control room far removed from the Battle Royale arena, the game master watched the feed from that drone. The entity, faceless, voiceless, observed Zhang Wei's psychological dismantling of the Berserker Queen with what might have been interest. Data streams scrolled across screens: anomaly number 7, Zhang Wei. Cheat type: unauthorized cognitive exploitation. Threat level: rising. The game master's intervention had already been set in motion. A new player entered the mall through the south entrance, moving with unnatural silence. This one didn't appear on the scanner at all, no weaknesses, no traumas, not even a name beyond the designation assigned by the system. The blank slate. Zhang Wei felt the absence like a sudden chill. For the first time since activating his cheat, the plot glitch scanner showed him nothing. No flicker of insight, no hidden flaw. Just emptiness. He's here, Zhang Wei whispered, pressing back against the corridor wall. The hunter with no weaknesses. Lin Mei followed his gaze. At the far end of the corridor, a figure stepped into the dim light. Average height, average build, clad in neutral gray combat gear. No weapons visible. No aura. No telltale signs of any class or ability. But the way it moved, smooth, efficient, utterly without hesitation, was more terrifying than any berserker's rage. The blank slate looked directly at them, its expression perfectly blank. Then it began to walk forward, each step measured, inevitable. Zhang Wei's mind raced. The scanner was useless. His knowledge was useless. For the first time since escaping Li Feng's lightning sword, he faced an opponent he couldn't outthink. And the safe zone timer ticked down to 19 minutes. The parking garage smelled of stale oil and damp concrete, a tomb of abandoned vehicles with shattered windows and flat tires. Zhang Wei pressed his back against a support column, his breathing shallow. His ankle throbbed with each heartbeat, a persistent reminder of his escape from Li Feng. Beside him, Lin Mei, Crystal Mage, clutched her locket, her knuckles white. The air grew colder, not from the environment but from something approaching. Footsteps echoed, methodical and unhurried, like a metronome counting down to an execution. From between two rusted sedans, a figure emerged. The blank slate stood 6 feet tall, clad in seamless gray armor that absorbed light rather than reflected it. Its face was a featureless mask, smooth as polished stone, with no eyes, no mouth, no hint of humanity. In its hands, it held twin blades that shimmered with a dull, metallic sheen, edges so sharp they seemed to cut the air itself. Zhang Wei's plot glitch scanner activated automatically, a familiar tingle at the base of his skull. But instead of the usual flood of insights, a childhood fear, a power flaw, an embarrassing secret, his vision filled with static. Red text scrolled across his mental display: error, no detectable weaknesses, possible artificial construct. His heart hammered against his ribs. For the first time since awakening in this nightmare, his cheat had failed him. This wasn't a player with hidden traumas, this was something else, something hollow. Lin Mei whispered, her voice trembling. What do we do? I can't sense any magical signature from it. It's like a void. Zhang Wei's mind raced. The game master had created this thing, a hunter designed to be unscannable, to counter his one advantage. But everything had a weakness, even if it wasn't psychological. He remembered the system message from the library, flagged for deletion. This was the executioner. It wouldn't stop, wouldn't hesitate, wouldn't feel. Like a program. And programs could be disrupted. The blank slate took a step forward, its movements fluid and efficient. No wasted motion, no emotion. It raised one blade, pointing it at Zhang Wei. A soft hum emanated from the weapon, a sound that set Zhang Wei's teeth on edge. He held up his hands, palms out, in a gesture of surrender. Lin Mei shot him a confused look, but he gave a slight shake of his head. Play along. Wait, Zhang Wei said, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at his throat. I know what you are. You're not a player. You're a puppet. The game master's little toy. The blank slate didn't react, didn't pause. It advanced another step, closing the distance to 10 meters. Zhang Wei forced a laugh, brittle and sharp. Do you even know why you're here? This whole game, it's a sham. A reality show for bored gods. We're all just entertainment, and you're the cleanup crew. He leaned forward, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper, though the garage amplified every sound. The game master lied to you. There's no victory, no escape. We're all going to die, and you're just another prop. Do you have a name? A memory? Or did they wipe you clean, like a blank slate? For a fraction of a second, the blank slate hesitated. Its head tilted, just a degree, as if processing the words. The hum from its blades faltered, dropping in pitch. Zhang Wei's scanner flickered, not with data but with a faint pulse, a conflict in its programming. The entity was designed to hunt anomalies, but his words had introduced a paradox: if the game was meaningless, then its purpose was meaningless. A glitch in the logic. Now! Zhang Wei shouted. Lin Mei reacted instantly, her hands flying up. Crystals erupted from the concrete floor, jagged shards of amethyst and quartz that shot toward the blank slate. At the same time, Zhang Wei lunged, not at the hunter but at a nearby car. He wrenched off a side mirror, its glass cracked but still reflective. As the blank slate slashed through the crystals with effortless precision, its blades a blur of motion, Zhang Wei angled the mirror to catch the dim overhead light. He flashed the reflection into the featureless mask. The blank slate froze again, its programming struggling with the unexpected sensory input, a glimpse of itself, a non-threat that nonetheless demanded processing cycles. In that moment of hesitation, Lin Mei channeled her magic through her locket, her eyes glowing with violet light. A massive crystal spike, thick as a tree trunk, burst from the ground beneath the blank slate's feet, aiming to impale it from below. The hunter moved at the last second, twisting with unnatural agility. The spike grazed its side, tearing a rent in the grey armor but drawing no blood. Instead, a spray of silvery fluid, like mercury, leaked out. The blank slate recovered instantly, one blade arcing toward Lin Mei's throat. Zhang Wei threw himself between them, his shoulder, still tender from the library wound, taking the brunt of the strike. The blade bit deep, slicing through muscle and grating against bone. White-hot pain exploded through his body, and he stumbled back, blood soaking his sleeve. Lin Mei cried out, her crystals reforming into a protective barrier around them. The blank slate pressed its advantage, its attacks relentless. Each parry sent shocks through Zhang Wei's arms, and his vision blurred from blood loss. He could feel his health draining, a cold weakness spreading from the wound. His scanner remained useless, but he didn't need it to see the pattern. The hunter fought with perfect efficiency, but it paused at contradictions, at illogical inputs. It was a machine, and machines could be confused. Gritting his teeth against the pain, Zhang Wei dropped to one knee, feigning collapse. The blank slate approached, its blades raised for a finishing strike. As it loomed over him, Zhang Wei looked up and smiled, blood trickling from his lips. The game master is watching, isn't he? Tell him I said hello. Tell him his puppet has a flaw after all, it thinks. The blank slate's head tilted again, that same slight angle. Its blades wavered. In that instant, Lin Mei unleashed her full power. The entire garage trembled as crystals erupted from every surface, ceilings, walls, cars, converging on the hunter in a deafening crash of shattering stone and metal. The blank slate was buried under tons of crystalline debris, its form pinned and cracking. Silence fell, broken only by Zhang Wei's ragged breathing. He clutched his shoulder, blood seeping through his fingers. The wound was bad, deep enough to threaten his survival if not treated soon. Lin Mei rushed to his side, her hands glowing with a faint healing light as she pressed them to the injury. It's not much, but it'll slow the bleeding, she said, her voice strained from exertion. Before Zhang Wei could respond, a crackle of static filled the air. From the rubble, the blank slate's mask emitted a pale glow. A distorted voice, genderless and cold, echoed through the garage. Game Master amused. Phase 2 initiated, all player weaknesses randomized hourly. The glow faded, and the hunter fell still, truly defeated. But Zhang Wei felt a sudden, sharp pain behind his eyes. His plot glitch scanner flickered violently, his vision swimming with garbled data, jumbled images, fragmented secrets, nonsense words. It was as if the cheat itself was glitching, overwhelmed by the system's new rules. He staggered, leaning against Lin Mei for support. The safe zone was shrinking, his enemies were hunting him, and now his one advantage had become unreliable. The game had just gotten infinitely more dangerous. The world contracted in a violent shudder of reality. Zhang Wei felt it before he saw it, a pressure in his skull like a vice tightening, followed by the sickening lurch of spatial compression. Outside the parking garage where the blank slate lay disabled, the cityscape folded in on itself. Buildings crumbled into shimmering pixels at the edges, dissolving into the encroaching void that marked the game's boundaries. Lin Mei gasped beside him, her crystal-laden fingers tightening around her locket. It's happening faster this time. Zhang Wei's shoulder throbbed where the blank slate's blade had bitten deep. Blood soaked through his makeshift bandage, a crimson stain spreading across the torn fabric of his shirt. He could feel the weakness in his limbs, the dizziness that came with significant blood loss. But survival demanded movement. His plot glitch scanner flickered back to life in his peripheral vision, the holographic interface stabilizing after its earlier garbling. New data streamed across his consciousness, but something was different. Where before weaknesses had been static, etched into players like permanent flaws, now they shimmered and shifted. A timer appeared in the corner of his vision, 59 minutes and 23 seconds and counting down. Hourly randomization, Zhang Wei muttered, understanding dawning. The transmission from the blank slate hadn't been an empty threat. Every weakness changes on the hour now. Lin Mei's eyes widened. Your cheat is now a race against time. Zhang Wei pushed himself up, wincing as fresh pain lanced through his shoulder. The safe zone had shrunk to a single structure, a 50-story skyscraper that rose from the urban wreckage like a tombstone. Its glass facade reflected the artificial sky, a monument to the game's final stage. They moved through streets that were becoming memories, the ground dissolving behind them into digital nothingness. Other players emerged from hiding places, a woman with spectral blades materializing from shadows, a man whose skin hardened to stone as he ran. All converging on the same destination. The skyscraper's lobby was a cathedral of chaos. Shattered glass crunched underfoot. A fountain in the center had run dry, its basin filled with discarded equipment and bloodstains. Zhang Wei counted 12 other survivors, their faces etched with varying degrees of desperation and calculation. His scanner pinged. Data flooded his mind, a torrent of shifting vulnerabilities. Asterisk player designation, pyrokinesis user. Class, elemental manipulator. Current weakness, fear of water. Duration remaining, 00 to 47 to 12, asterisk. Zhang Wei's eyes found the man immediately. He stood near the elevators, flames dancing across his knuckles in practice patterns. His combat gear was scorched at the edges, and his eyes burned with the confidence of someone who'd survived this long by reducing opponents to ash. The scanner provided additional context. This player's weakness had shifted from something as trivial as untied shoes to a deep-seated hydrophobia, likely a trauma response from some past incident the game had implanted or exploited. "We need to get higher," Lin Mei whispered. "The rooftop will be the last stand." Zhang Wei nodded, his mind already working through possibilities. The constant recalculation of weaknesses was exhausting him mentally. Each time his scanner updated, he had to discard previous strategies and formulate new ones, all while managing his injuries and monitoring other threats. It was like playing chess against a clock that changed the rules every minute. They took the stairs, avoiding the elevators which were likely death traps. On the 5th-floor landing, they encountered their first obstacle, a barrier of solidified shadow that blocked their path. A player stepped from the darkness, her form flickering between corporeal and ethereal. Asterisk player designation, Shadow Dancer. Class, Stealth Assassin. Current weakness, photon-based attacks. Duration remaining, 00 to 39 to 47, asterisk. Zhang Wei didn't have photon-based attacks. Lin Mei's crystals refracted light, but not with enough intensity. He calculated quickly, 39 minutes until her weakness changed, possibly to something they could exploit. But they didn't have 39 minutes. "Your locket," Zhang Wei said suddenly, turning to Lin Mei. "Can you focus its magic into a concentrated beam?" She hesitated, her hand going to the silver pendant at her throat. "The sentimental connection makes my magic unstable when I know. But unstable might be exactly what we need." Zhang Wei's scanner showed him the flaw in her magic, the emotional tether that made it powerful but unpredictable. Aim not at her, but at the ceiling above her. Understanding dawned in Lin Mei's eyes. She raised her hands, crystals forming around her fingers like frost on glass. The locket glowed with a soft blue light, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. She whispered something, a name, perhaps, or a memory, and unleashed the energy. It wasn't a clean beam but a jagged lance of crystalline force that shattered the ceiling tiles above the Shadow Dancer. Dust and debris rained down, followed by something more valuable, emergency lighting that had been hidden above the drop ceiling. Photon strips flickered to life, bathing the landing in harsh white light. The Shadow Dancer screamed, her form dissolving as the photons disrupted her shadow cohesion. She fled down the corridor, leaving the path clear. Lin Mei sagged against the wall, breathing heavily. "That took more than I expected." "Your emotional connection to the locket is both your strength and your limitation," Zhang Wei said, helping her up. "Remember that when your weakness changes next hour." They continued upward, floor after floor. The building was a vertical battlefield now. On the 15th floor, they witnessed a brutal confrontation between two players, a telekinetic whose weakness had shifted to vertigo, and a gravity manipulator who exploited it by tilting the entire corridor. The telekinetic fell screaming through a window. Zhang Wei's mental fatigue grew with each encounter. His scanner demanded constant attention, updating weaknesses in real time. He found himself recalculating strategies mid-step, discarding plans that had been valid minutes before. The strain manifested as a migraine building behind his eyes, a pressure that made it difficult to focus. On the 27th floor, they encountered the pyrokinesis user again. He'd cornered another player in an office suite, flames roaring from his hands to create an inferno that melted computers and ignited filing cabinets. The other player, a woman with sonic scream abilities, was backing toward a shattered window, her weakness having shifted to susceptibility to high temperatures. Current weakness, fear of water. Duration remaining, 00 to 12 to 04. Zhang Wei scanned the environment. Sprinkler heads dotted the ceiling, their red glass bulbs promising salvation through simple mechanics. But the fire suppression system would need activation. Lin Mei, can you create a crystal shard small enough to throw with precision? She nodded, forming a diamond-shaped fragment in her palm. The control panel by the elevator, Zhang Wei pointed. There's a manual override behind that glass. He could see it with his scanner's enhanced perception, the system schematics overlaid on his vision, showing water lines running through the building. The pyrokinesis user noticed them. More fuel for the fire, he called out, a grin splitting his soot-stained face. Flames coiled around his arms like serpents. Zhang Wei stepped forward, keeping his injured shoulder turned away. Your fire's impressive. Must have taken years to master. Natural talent, the man boasted, clearly enjoying an audience before the kill. I was burning things before I could walk. But even natural talents have their limits. Zhang Wei's scanner ticked down, 8 minutes and 17 seconds. Fire needs oxygen. Fuel. Control. And I have all three. The pyrokinesis user launched a fireball. Zhang Wei dodged, the heat searing the air beside his face. What about water? The man flinched, almost imperceptibly. What about it? Just curious. Zhang Wei kept moving, drawing the man's attention while Lin Mei positioned herself near the control panel. Some pyros I've known had issues with moisture. Dampens the flames, you know. Shut up. Another fireball, wider this time. Zhang Wei rolled behind an overturned desk, feeling the wood char instantly. 5 minutes and 42 seconds. There's something about water, isn't there? Zhang Wei pressed, rising from cover. The way it hisses when it meets flame. The steam that rises. The complete extinguishment. I said shut up. The pyrokinesis user's control wavered, flames licking erratically at the ceiling. His eyes darted to the sprinkler heads, then back to Zhang Wei. You don't know anything. I know you're afraid of it. Zhang Wei said it calmly, a statement of fact. Not just its effect on your fire. You're afraid of water itself. The man's bravado cracked. My brother, he drowned when we were kids. I couldn't, the water. 2 minutes and 11 seconds. Now, Lin Mei. The crystal shard flew true, shattering the glass covering the manual override. Lin Mei's follow-up crystal struck the emergency lever beneath. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the sprinklers erupted. Water fell in a sudden deluge, drenching everything. The flames died instantly with a chorus of hisses and steam. But for the pyrokinesis user, it was more than just his fire being extinguished. He screamed, a raw, primal sound of terror, as the water hit him. He dropped to his knees, clawing at his face as if drowning in the open air. His powers flickered and died, not just suppressed but psychologically shattered. The childhood trauma the game had implanted or exploited had been triggered completely. Zhang Wei moved through the downpour, ignoring the water soaking his bandages and stinging his wounds. He grabbed the man's supply pack, rifling through it quickly. Medkits, nutrient bars, a compact energy blade. Precious resources. Why? The pyrokinesis user gasped, water streaming down his face like tears. Why does it have to be water? Because the game knows what hurts us most, Zhang Wei said, slinging the pack over his good shoulder. And right now, it's changing those hurts every hour just to keep things interesting. They left the man kneeling in the growing puddle, his spirit broken more thoroughly than any physical defeat could accomplish. Higher they climbed, past floors where other battles raged. Zhang Wei's mental exhaustion deepened. Each new weakness assessment required intense focus, and with his injuries sapping his physical strength, the dual toll was becoming unbearable. He caught himself leaning against walls for support, his vision blurring at the edges. You need to rest, Lin Mei said as they reached the 39th floor. No time, Zhang Wei gasped. The rooftop. 5 minutes. Please. They barricaded themselves in a server room, its cold, dry air a relief after the sprinkler-soaked floors below. Zhang Wei slumped against a rack of dead servers, finally allowing himself to feel the full extent of his fatigue. His shoulder wound had reopened, blood mixing with water to create pinkish rivulets down his arm. Lin Mei applied one of the stolen medkits, the nanite gel sealing the worst of the damage. This will stabilize you, but you need proper medical attention. When we get out of here, Zhang Wei said, though neither of them believed that was possible anymore. His scanner updated again. A new hour, new weaknesses. Lin Mei shifted from emotional instability when locket is threatened to susceptibility to sudden loud noises. His own status, previously not something the scanner analyzed, now showed a flickering entry, asterisk mental fatigue, high. Decision-making capacity, diminished, asterisk. Even his cheat was turning against him, quantifying his deterioration. They reached the rooftop access door on the 50th floor. Beyond it, wind howled across open space. Zhang Wei pushed it open, and they emerged into the game's final arena. The rooftop was vast, a concrete plain dotted with ventilation units and communication equipment. The edges dropped away into the void, the safe zone had shrunk to just this platform high above a dissolving world. Perhaps 20 other players had made it this far, scattered in defensive positions around the perimeter. And in the center stood Li Feng. The protagonist's lightning sword crackled with energy, casting blue-white light across his sharp features. He wasn't alone. Flanking him were 3 other top rankers, players Zhang Wei recognized from his scanner's earlier assessments. The woman with spectral blades. The man with stone skin. And a new one, a figure wrapped in bandages that swirled with arcane symbols. Li Feng's eyes found Zhang Wei immediately. A cruel smile touched his lips. Zhang Wei, he called out, his voice carrying across the wind. We've been waiting. Zhang Wei's scanner raced through assessments, but Li Feng's weakness remained frustratingly consistent, asterisk hidden guilt over past betrayal. Duration, permanent, asterisk the randomization hadn't affected it, perhaps because it was too integral to his character, or perhaps because the game wanted this confrontation to happen on specific terms. You've made quite the nuisance of yourself, Li Feng continued, stepping forward. Lightning arced from his blade to the concrete at his feet. Exploiting weaknesses. Turning players against each other. The Game Master isn't pleased. The Game Master can go to hell, Zhang Wei said, though his voice lacked its usual edge. The mental strain was showing. Oh, he's already there, Li Feng said. And he's brought friends. The other top rankers spread out, forming a loose circle. But it was Li Feng who made the declaration, raising his sword so its lightning illuminated the entire rooftop. We've formed a pact, he announced, loud enough for every remaining player to hear. A temporary alliance with one purpose, eliminate the anomaly first. His sword swept in an arc, and where the lightning touched the concrete, flames erupted. Not natural fire, but magical flames that burned white-hot, forming a perfect ring that surrounded Zhang Wei and Lin Mei. The circle was 30 feet across, enough space to move, but not to escape. You've played your psychological games long enough, Li Feng said, stepping into the ring of fire. The flames parted for him like loyal subjects. Now let's see how you fare when the rules are simple, you against all of us. The other top rankers stepped through the flames as well, their weapons drawn. Spectral blades shimmered into existence. Stone skin hardened to diamond density. Bandages unwound to reveal glowing runes beneath. Zhang Wei backed toward Lin Mei, his mind racing even through the fatigue. His scanner showed him their weaknesses, shifting even now as another hour approached. But with 4 opponents, each with different vulnerabilities that changed independently, the calculations were becoming impossible. He was trying to solve multiple moving puzzles simultaneously while bleeding and exhausted. Li Feng raised his lightning sword. Any last psychological insights? Any weaknesses to exploit? The ring of fire tightened, shrinking their space to 20 feet. Zhang Wei looked at Lin Mei, then at the circle of enemies, then at the void beyond the rooftop edge. His plot glitch scanner flickered, overwhelmed by data. For the first time since he'd awakened in this nightmare, he had no immediate answer. The flames climbed higher, cutting off even the sky. The rooftop air tasted of ozone and desperation. Zhang Wei stood with his back to the skyscraper's edge, the ring of magical fire casting dancing shadows across his face. Crystal Mage, Lin Mei, stood beside him, her crystal constructs shimmering with defensive energy. Across the flames, Li Feng's lightning sword crackled with contained fury, flanked by his 3 allies, the shadow dancer melting into the darkness, the stone-skin warrior's granite flesh gleaming, and the rune-bound caster whose fingers traced glowing sigils in the air. Your little tricks end here, Li Feng declared, his voice cutting through the fire's roar. The game tolerates anomalies, but you've become a glitch that needs patching. Zhang Wei's heart hammered against his ribs. His shoulder throbbed where the blank slate's blade had bitten deep, the stolen medkits only dulling the pain to a persistent ache. But worse was the mental fatigue, the constant recalculation as his plot glitch scanner flickered with shifting data. Every hour, the weaknesses changed. Every hour, he had to rebuild his understanding of the battlefield from scratch. He focused on Li Feng, activating the scanner. The familiar overlay appeared in his vision, but the data streamed differently now, faster, more chaotic. It settled on two lines that made Zhang Wei's breath catch. Li Feng, weakness, guilt over mentor's death, persistent trauma. Secondary weakness, secretly enjoys bad puns, subconscious pleasure response. The guilt he'd expected. The scanner had hinted at it before. But the puns? That was new, a quirk buried so deep even Li Feng probably didn't acknowledge it. Zhang Wei's mind raced. The fire ring was complete, the magical barrier shimmering with heat distortion. The stone skin warrior took a step forward, cracking the rooftop concrete with his weight. Wait! Zhang Wei shouted, raising his hands in what he hoped looked like surrender. Li Feng's eyes narrowed. No more stalling. Just one question, Zhang Wei said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Why does lightning never strike the same place twice? Silence. The shadow dancer shifted impatiently. The rune-bound caster's sigils glowed brighter. Because it's already struck there, Zhang Wei continued, his eyes locked on Li Feng's. Get it? Already struck. Like, the spot's already been struck. The pun hung in the air, terrible and awkward. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then Li Feng's stern expression twitched. A snort escaped his lips, uncontrolled, involuntary. His shoulders shook once, twice, and for that single precious second, the edgy protagonist's perfect composure shattered. The lightning sword flickered. The fire ring wavered. Zhang Wei didn't hesitate. He grabbed Lin Mei's arm and dove toward the rooftop's ventilation system, a metal grate he'd spotted earlier. His injured shoulder screamed in protest as he slammed his good shoulder into the cover, popping it loose. They tumbled into darkness just as Li Feng recovered, his roar of anger following them down the shaft. After them. Li Feng's command echoed in the metal tunnel. Zhang Wei and Lin Mei slid down the ventilation shaft, metal scraping against their clothes. The darkness was absolute save for the faint glow of Lin Mei's crystals. They landed in a maintenance corridor, the air thick with dust and the hum of machinery. That was a pun. Lin Mei whispered, helping Zhang Wei to his feet. His secret shame, Zhang Wei gasped, clutching his shoulder. Fresh blood seeped through the bandages. The scanner's showing layers now, primary weaknesses and secondary quirks. The randomization isn't erasing them, just shuffling their priority. They moved through the corridor, the sounds of pursuit growing distant. The building's infrastructure surrounded them, pipes, conduits, server racks humming with energy. Zhang Wei's scanner flickered again, but this time it wasn't showing player weaknesses. It was highlighting something else, a data trail, glowing lines in his vision that led deeper into the skyscraper's bowels. What is it? Lin Mei asked, seeing his focused expression. The scanner's picking up something, structural, Zhang Wei murmured. Not weaknesses. Architecture. System architecture. He followed the glowing trail, Lin Mei close behind. They passed through security doors that should have been locked but opened at their approach, as if the building itself was guiding them. The hum grew louder, becoming a chorus of cooling fans and processing units. The corridor ended at a reinforced door marked server room, authorized personnel only. Zhang Wei placed his hand against the biometric scanner. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a green light flashed, and the door hissed open. Inside was a cavernous space filled with server racks stretching toward a distant ceiling. Monitors lined the walls, most dark but a few displaying scrolling code and system diagnostics. The air was cold, artificially chilled to protect the equipment. This doesn't make sense, Lin Mei said, her crystals casting blue light across the room. Why would a Battle Royale arena have a server farm this size? Zhang Wei approached the central console. His scanner overlay now showed connections, data streams flowing from the servers to somewhere else. Not to the game system. To external receivers. He touched the console. A login screen appeared, then vanished as his scanner interfaced with the system. Files began to open automatically, logs, recordings, broadcast schedules. Oh no, Zhang Wei whispered. The first file was a production schedule. Episode 8, Rooftop Confrontation, Li Feng vs Anomaly 47, Zhang Wei. Below it, notes, ensure dramatic tension. Camera drones positioned at angles 3, 7, and 12. Special effects team ready for lightning sequences. The second file was viewer statistics. Current audience, 4.7 million premium subscribers. Engagement spikes during Zhang Wei's psychological tactics. Note, consider extending his arc, ratings favorable. The third file broke him. It was a contract. Player contracts. Each contestant, Li Feng, Crystal Mage, Berserker Queen, all of them, had signed agreements. Reality Entertainment Participation Agreement. Clause 14, all simulated deaths are staged using advanced holographic and neural suggestion technology. No physical harm shall come to contestants beyond approved minor injuries for authenticity. It's a show, Zhang Wei said, his voice hollow. All of it. The battles, the deaths, the drama, it's entertainment for wealthy viewers. Lin Mei stared at the screens, her face pale. My sister, she died in the third episode. I saw her burn. Zhang Wei opened another file, contestant status logs. He found her sister's entry, Lin XIA, status, eliminated, episode 3. Current status, recovering in medical wing. Memory suppression protocol active. She's alive, Zhang Wei said softly. Lin Mei's crystals flared with sudden, violent light. All this pain, all this fear, for ratings. Zhang Wei scrolled through more files. The game master wasn't some omnipotent system entity, it was a production director. The deletion threats were about maintaining narrative control. The customized hunters like the blank slate were special effects constructs. Even the shrinking safe zone was a staged escalation to force dramatic confrontations. His own entry appeared, Zhang Wei, designation, trash villain, fated death episode 3. Current status, anomaly 47. Scanner ability unaccounted for in script. Recommendation, allow to continue, audience engagement exceptional. He'd never transmigrated into a novel. He'd been inserted into a reality show. His cheat wasn't a system glitch, it was some kind of backdoor access to production data. The plot glitch scanner was reading the script, the character notes, the psychological profiles written by the show's writers. The revelation hit him like physical blow. All his survival, all his clever manipulations, they'd been performing for an audience. His psychological warfare wasn't just surviving, it was primetime entertainment. We have to tell the others, Lin Mei said, her voice trembling with rage. They won't believe us, Zhang Wei said. Their memories are suppressed. The trauma feels real because the neural suggestion makes it real. He kept reading. The final file was the master script for the season finale. Episode 15, Final Confrontation. Anomaly 47, Zhang Wei, reveals truth to Li Feng. Emotional breakdown. Game master intervenes. Conclusion, either Zhang Wei accepts contract as permanent cast member, or is permanently neural wiped. So that was the choice. Become a willing performer, or have his mind erased. The console screens went dark. Then a single monitor flickered to life, showing only a stylized GM logo. A voice filled the server room, rich and theatrical, echoing from hidden speakers. Zhang Wei. You've uncovered the script. The behind-the-scenes magic. The wires holding up the puppets. It was the game master's voice, but different now. Less omnipotent system, more director. Your performance has been extraordinary, the voice continued. The audience loves an underdog. They adore how you turn weaknesses into weapons. How you see through the facades. Zhang Wei stared at the screen. All those deaths. Simulations. Neural theater. The contestants wake up in recovery rooms, their memories edited to believe in their heroic sacrifices or tragic ends. It's cleaner than real battle royales. More sustainable. And far more profitable. Why tell me this? Zhang Wei demanded. Why not just neural wipe me now? Because you've become part of the story, the game master said, and Zhang Wei could hear the smile in the voice. The anomaly who sees the strings. The meta character. We have a proposition for you, Zhang Wei. Join the writing team. Help craft next season's narratives. Your understanding of psychological weakness would be invaluable. Lin Mei stepped forward, her crystals forming defensive patterns. We're leaving. We're telling everyone. Ah, Lin Mei, the game master said. Your sister awaits you in the green room. She's been asking about you. The cruelty of it took Zhang Wei's breath away. Psychological warfare on a scale he'd never imagined. Then the voice changed again, dropping the theatricality. But first, a change of scenery. The safe zone concept has grown stale. Let's try something new. A system-wide alert blared through the server room, through the entire skyscraper, through whatever remained of the battlefield. Safe zone deactivated. All restrictions lifted. Current player count, 14. Final phase initiated, free-for-all. No boundaries. No rules. Entertainment value, projected maximum. On the monitors, Zhang Wei saw the magical barriers that had contained the battle vanish. The entire sector, buildings, streets, ruins, opened up. No more forced confrontations. Now it was pure chaos. The game master's voice returned for one final line, booming through every speaker in the city. Zhang Wei, you've uncovered the script. But can you rewrite it? Then silence. In the server room, the only sound was the hum of machinery and Lin Mei's ragged breathing. Zhang Wei looked at his hands, the hands that had manipulated, survived, performed. The plot glitch scanner still glowed in his vision, but now he understood what it truly was, access to the production notes. The writer's room. The script. He could see the weaknesses shifting again on his mental display, all players, all their hourly changing flaws. But now he could also see the data streams connecting to the production servers. He could see where the narrative was being crafted. What do we do? Lin Mei whispered. Zhang Wei looked at the exit, then back at the servers. The truth was a weapon heavier than any blade. It changed everything, and nothing. They still had to survive. The other players still believed in the game. Li Feng would still hunt him. But now Zhang Wei knew the rules weren't rules, they were suggestions. The deaths weren't deaths, they were plot points. And his role as the trash villain, that was just a starting character note. He took a deep breath, the cold server room air filling his lungs. His shoulder still ached. His mind still felt frayed from constant recalculation. But beneath the fatigue, something new kindled, not just survival instinct, but something darker. More creative. If this was a story, he wouldn't just survive it. He'd rewrite it. The ventilation shaft opened into a maintenance corridor, its walls lined with flickering data conduits that pulsed with faint blue light. Zhang Wei leaned against the cold metal, his shoulder throbbing with a dull, persistent ache. The stolen medkits had stabilized the wound, but every movement sent fresh jolts of pain through his system. Beside him, Lin Mei's crystals glowed softly, illuminating her worried expression. We can't stay here, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of machinery. The entire sector is open now. No boundaries. Zhang Wei nodded, his mind racing. The revelation about the game's true nature, a reality show, all deaths staged, hung in his thoughts like a ghost. His plot glitch scanner flickered in his peripheral vision, its interface now showing shifting data streams. Instead of inherent weaknesses, it accessed production logs, character backstories, viewer metrics. The hourly randomization was a programming glitch, a failsafe to keep the show unpredictable. He understood now, every player's secret was a scripted plot point. He pushed off the wall, wincing. We need to move. Li Feng will track us. They hadn't taken 10 steps when a shadow detached from the ceiling. The figure landed silently, blocking their path. He was young, perhaps early 20s, with sharp features and eyes that burned with cold fury. He wore simple combat gear, unadorned but well-maintained, and held a pair of twin daggers with practiced ease. Zhang Wei's scanner activated instantly, overlaying text in his vision. Player, disciple, unnamed. Class, stealth assassin. Weakness, blind loyalty to Old Man Chen's memory. Easily manipulated by narratives about his mentor, ***. Production notes, character arc number 47, seeks revenge for Chen's perceived betrayal by Li Feng. Scheduled for emotional breakdown in episode 9, ***. Zhang Wei, the disciple said, his voice low and venomous. I've been waiting. Lin Mei raised her hands, crystals forming defensive shards around them. Who are you? I am the last student of Old Man Chen, he spat. The mentor Li Feng betrayed. And you've been helping that snake survive. I saw the rooftop. You escaped his justice. Zhang Wei's mind worked quickly. Old Man Chen, a name from the logs. A minor character, a wise mentor figure killed off early to motivate Li Feng's edgy backstory. According to production data, Chen had actually died in a staged accident, but the narrative painted Li Feng as indirectly responsible. This disciple was a loose thread, a subplot left dangling. Chen didn't see it as betrayal, Zhang Wei said, keeping his voice calm. He took a half step forward, ignoring the pain in his shoulder. I accessed the server logs. The truth is in the data. The disciple's grip on his daggers tightened. Lies. Chen taught me everything. He said Li Feng was his greatest disappointment. Because Li Feng refused to play by the rules, Zhang Wei countered, weaving fiction from fragments of production notes. Chen approved of that. He wanted someone to challenge the system. Li Feng's actions, the so-called betrayal, were a test. Chen orchestrated it all. He knew the game was a sham. He wanted Li Feng to expose it. He saw the doubt flicker in the disciple's eyes. The scanner's weakness analysis was precise, blind loyalty. This player's entire identity was built on Chen's memory. Challenge that, and the foundation crumbled. You're lying, the disciple whispered, but his daggers lowered slightly. Check the logs yourself, Zhang Wei said, gesturing to a nearby terminal. Its screen glowed with access codes. Section 9, Subfile, Mentor Protocols. Chen's final message. He wanted you to know the truth. It was a gamble. The terminal was real, but Zhang Wei had no idea what it contained. He relied on the disciple's need for closure, for a narrative that made sense of his mentor's death. The disciple hesitated, then took a step toward the terminal. His guard dropped completely. In that moment, Zhang Wei moved. Pain screamed through his shoulder as he lunged, but he pushed through it. He wasn't aiming to kill, he couldn't, not with the revelation about staged deaths. Instead, he swept the disciple's legs out from under him, a move he'd seen in a dozen combat logs. The disciple fell hard, daggers clattering to the floor. Lin Mei's crystals shot forward, pinning his arms without breaking skin. Don't, Zhang Wei said, kneeling beside him. I'm not your enemy. The game master is. The producers. They're the ones who killed Chen, not Li Feng, not me. They wrote his death for ratings. The disciple struggled, but the crystals held fast. Why should I believe you? Because I'm offering you the truth, Zhang Wei said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. He felt his social energy draining, the effort of persuasion, of crafting a believable story from scraps of data. It left him weary, his mental fatigue deepening. Join me. Help me expose this. Chen would have wanted that. He saw the change in the disciple's eyes. The fury melted into confusion, then a desperate hope. What do you need? Information. The control center, where the game master operates. The logs mentioned a primary hub in Sector 7. The disciple nodded slowly. I've seen it. During my training runs. It's heavily guarded by automated sentinels. But there's a maintenance access tunnel, Chen showed me. He said it was for emergencies. Zhang Wei helped him up, retrieving the daggers but handing them back. A gesture of trust. Take us there. They moved through the corridors, the disciple, who introduced himself as Kai, leading the way. He spoke in hushed tones about Chen, about training sessions that felt real but were now tainted by doubt. Zhang Wei listened, his scanner updating with Kai's full profile, a background character elevated to minor antagonist, his weakness now a tool for manipulation. It left a bitter taste in Zhang Wei's mouth. He was using this kid, just like the producers did. They reached a junction where the corridor branched into 3 paths. Kai pointed to the leftmost one. That leads to the access tunnel. It's a half-mile walk, but it bypasses most of the security. Lin Mei frowned. We should rest first. Zhang Wei, you're pale. He was. The combined weight of his injury, the mental fatigue from processing shifting weaknesses, and now the psychological toll of manipulating Kai had left him hollow. But rest was a luxury they couldn't afford. Later, he said. We need to. The air crackled with ozone. A bolt of lightning struck the corridor ahead, carving a molten scar into the floor. Li Feng stepped into view, his lightning sword humming with energy. His expression was cold, focused. But he wasn't alone. Beside him stood a woman Zhang Wei recognized instantly, the Berserker Queen. She was taller than he remembered, her armor polished to a dark sheen, and her rage aura simmered like a heat haze around her. But something was different. Her eyes, once wild with fury, now held a sharp, calculated intensity. She looked at Zhang Wei, and a slow, venomous smile spread across her face. "Zhang Wei," Li Feng said, his voice echoing in the confined space. "You can't run forever." Kai tensed, his daggers rising. "Li Feng. You betrayed Chen." Li Feng ignored him, his gaze fixed on Zhang Wei. "I've realigned my priorities. The game master offered me a deal, eliminate the anomaly, and I get a guaranteed spot in the next season. No more random weaknesses." Zhang Wei's scanner flickered, analyzing the new threat. It pulled data from the production logs. Player, Berserker Queen, real name, Lily. Class, Rage Warrior. Current status, Redeemed Arc activated. Weakness, Childhood Abandonment, repurposed as motivation. Now seeks vengeance for psychological insult, Lily exposure, ****. Production notes, Character Development Episode 9, Turn from Mindless Brute to Strategic Hunter. The Berserker Queen took a step forward, her voice a low growl. "You whispered my name. You used it to break me. Now I'll return the favor. I'll break every bone in your body before Li Feng finishes you." Zhang Wei backed up, his mind racing. Two top-tier opponents, one with a personal grudge. The corridor offered little cover. Lin Mei's crystals flared brighter, but her hands trembled, she was exhausted too. Kai looked between them, his loyalty wavering. "Li Feng, is what he said true? About Chen?" Li Feng's eyes narrowed. "Old man Chen was a fool. He died because he was weak. Just like you will." That sealed it. Kai's expression hardened, his daggers steadying. "Then I fight with Zhang Wei." Li Feng raised his sword. "So be it." The Berserker Queen charged first, her rage aura expanding like a shockwave. The air grew thick, oppressive. Zhang Wei's shoulder screamed in protest as he dodged her first swing, a massive axe blade of condensed anger that shattered the wall behind him. Lin Mei retaliated, sending crystal shards streaking toward the Berserker Queen, but they bounced off her armor, deflected by the aura. "Her weak point is gone." Lin Mei shouted. "The scanner, it's randomized." Zhang Wei knew better. It wasn't randomization, it was character development. The producers had rewritten her, turning her weakness into strength. He had no exploitable secret, no childhood trauma to whisper. Only the lingering knowledge that she hated the name Lily, and now that hatred was weaponized. Li Feng moved in tandem, his lightning sword arcing toward Kai. The disciple met him blade for blade, their strikes a blur of metal and sparks. Kai was good, Chen had trained him well, but Li Feng was the protagonist, his skills honed by narrative necessity. Every parry was a fraction too slow, every dodge a hair's breadth short. Zhang Wei ducked under another of the Berserker Queen's attacks, his scanner desperately searching for something, anything. It fed him production data, viewer engagement metrics spiking, camera drones hovering invisibly above, the game master watching from the control center. This was the climax of Episode 9, scheduled for maximum drama. He couldn't fight them head-on. Not injured, not exhausted. He needed to change the script. "Lily," he shouted, rolling away from her axe. "The producers are laughing at you. They turned you into a joke, a rage monster with a cute name." She roared, her aura flaring crimson. "Shut up. They're watching right now." Zhang Wei continued, backing toward the access tunnel. "Every move you make, every scream, it's entertainment for rich viewers. You're not a warrior, you're a puppet." He saw it, a flicker of doubt in her eyes. The scanner highlighted it, psychological vulnerability, awareness of manipulation triggers existential crisis, but it was fleeting. She shook it off, her rage overriding logic. Li Feng disarmed Kai with a brutal kick, sending the disciple sprawling. He turned toward Zhang Wei, lightning gathering around his sword. "Enough talk. Die." Zhang Wei met his eyes. "You know the truth, Li Feng. The game master offered me a writing role. They offered you a spot in the next season. We're both pawns. But I choose to break the board." For a second, Li Feng hesitated. The scanner showed it, hidden guilt over past betrayals, amplified by truth exposure, but then his protagonist programming reasserted itself. "I choose to win." He lunged. Zhang Wei had nowhere to go. The Berserker Queen blocked the left, Li Feng the right. Lin Mei was pinned by falling debris, her crystals straining to hold it back. Kai struggled to rise, a deep gash on his arm. This was it. The scheduled death scene. But Zhang Wei's scanner suddenly flashed, a new data stream, unencrypted. A backdoor in the system, left open by the Game Master's offer. He accessed it in a split second, and the world shifted. The corridor lights flickered, then died. Emergency luminescence bathed everything in eerie green. A system-wide alert echoed from hidden speakers, anomaly detected in narrative integrity. Deletion protocol initiated. Li Feng's sword stopped inches from Zhang Wei's throat. He looked confused. The Berserker Queen froze, her rage aura sputtering. From the shadows behind them, a new figure emerged. Tall, clad in sleek black armor, face obscured by a smooth helmet. The scanner identified it instantly. Entity, Narrative Enforcer. Class, System Guardian. Purpose, eliminate anomalies that threaten show stability. Production notes, emergency measure, deploys when protagonists and antagonists ally against system. It raised a hand, and reality itself seemed to warp. Li Feng was thrown back, his lightning sword flickering out. The Berserker Queen screamed as her rage aura was forcibly suppressed. The Enforcer turned its featureless helmet toward Zhang Wei. You have disrupted the story, a synthesized voice said. You will be corrected. Zhang Wei smiled, blood trickling from his lip. Too late. The audience already knows the truth. He'd done it. He'd forced the system to reveal its own hand. The Enforcer was proof, the game was breaking. But the cost was immediate. The Enforcer's gaze locked onto him, and a wave of nullifying energy washed over the corridor. Zhang Wei's scanner glitched violently, his vision swimming. He collapsed to his knees, his shoulder exploding in fresh agony. The last thing he saw was Li Feng rising, his eyes now filled with something new, not hatred, but realization. And the Berserker Queen, her rage gone, staring at her hands as if seeing them for the first time. Then darkness. The ruined plaza stretched out like a forgotten chessboard, its cracked concrete tiles stained with the phantom memories of staged violence. Zhang Wei leaned against the rusted skeleton of a fountain, his breath coming in ragged gasps that pulled at the burning wound in his shoulder. The plot glitch scanner flickered in his vision, a persistent ghost of information that had become both his salvation and his curse. Across the open space, Li Feng stood with lightning crackling along the edge of his sword. The edgy protagonist's eyes burned with the certainty of narrative destiny, but there was something new there too, a flicker of doubt that hadn't been present before the rooftop, before the terrible pun that had broken his concentration. Beside him, the Berserker Queen, Lily, the scanner whispered, radiated her rage aura like a visible heat distortion. Her armor plates ground together with each heavy breath, but her gaze kept darting to the empty spaces around her, as if checking for ghosts. Li Feng, weakness, guilt and puns, Berserker Queen, weakness, real name Lily and fear of being alone. The scanner's update burned behind Zhang Wei's eyes. Not just information now, but a blueprint for psychological demolition. He could feel the weight of it, the knowledge that these weren't game mechanics he was exploiting, but actual human traumas, carefully written into characters by some unseen writer's hand. You can't run this time, Li Feng called across the distance, his voice carrying the artificial echo of the arena's acoustics. The safe zone is gone. There's nowhere left to hide. Zhang Wei pushed himself upright, ignoring the flare of pain in his shoulder. His mind raced through the scanner's data, cross-referencing what he'd learned in the server room. Li Feng's guilt wasn't just a character flaw, it was a plot point, carefully seeded by the writers. The betrayal of Old Man Chen, the mentor who had taken him in when he had nothing. The scanner showed it all, the suppressed memory, the way Li Feng woke sometimes in the dead of night with the old man's dying words echoing in his ears. I'm not hiding, Zhang Wei said, his voice surprisingly steady. I'm just choosing my battles. He took a step forward, his boots crunching on broken glass. The scanner flickered again, showing him the exact psychological pressure points. For Li Feng, it was the guilt, specifically, the moment Chen had forgiven him with his last breath, a forgiveness Li Feng had never believed he deserved. For Lily, it was the abandonment, the way her parents had left her at the orphanage on a rainy Tuesday, telling her they'd be back soon, knowing they wouldn't. You turned Kai against me, Li Feng said, his lightning sword humming with building energy. You poisoned his mind. I told him the truth, Zhang Wei replied, keeping his movements slow and non-threatening. The scanner showed him Li Feng's tells, the slight tremble in his sword hand when confronted with moral ambiguity, the way his eyes dropped to the left when remembering Chen's face. Chen forgave you. Actually forgave you. Not as some deathbed cliché, but because he saw what you could become. Li Feng's expression tightened. The lightning along his blade stuttered for a fraction of a second. You don't know anything about Chen. I know he called you son when no one else would, Zhang Wei said, pushing the words like needles into precisely mapped psychological wounds. I know he stayed up nights worrying about your recklessness. I know his last words weren't about vengeance, they were about hope. For you. The scanner showed the impact in real time. Li Feng's combat readiness dropped by 18%. His tracking skill, the one that had hounded Zhang Wei across half the arena, flickered offline as his concentration fractured. The guilt, carefully buried under layers of edgy protagonist bravado, rose to the surface like a corpse from deep water. Shut up, Li Feng whispered, but the command lacked conviction. Zhang Wei turned his attention to the Berserker Queen. Her rage aura pulsed, but the scanner showed the cracks in it, the way it thinned whenever she was alone, how it relied on the presence of others to feed its fire. She was a character written to be powerful in groups, vulnerable in solitude. A classic trope, now weaponized. Lily, he said, and the name hung in the air between them. She flinched as if struck. Her armor plates rattled. Don't call me that. Why not? It's your name. Zhang Wei took another step, closing the distance. The scanner showed him her psychological architecture, the orphanage, the empty bed beside hers, the way she'd learned to make herself loud and dangerous so no one would leave her again. You think you need them? Li Feng, the other top rankers, anyone who'll stand beside you. But you don't. You're trying to manipulate me, she snarled, but her voice trembled at the edges. I'm telling you the truth, Zhang Wei said, and for a moment, he almost believed it himself. The scanner showed him the exact words to use, the phrasing that would bypass her defensive rage and touch the lonely child underneath. You're stronger alone. The rage, the power, it comes from you, not from them. They're just distractions. Noise. He saw it happen in slow motion. The moment her psychological armor shattered. The scanner displayed the cascade failure, abandonment trauma triggered, self-reliance narrative activated, group dependency collapsing. Her rage aura didn't just fade, it inverted, turning inward. She dropped to one knee, her armored hands coming up to clutch at her helmet as if trying to hold her own mind together. Alone, she whispered, and the word was a confession. Li Feng stared at her, then back at Zhang Wei. The lightning along his sword had died completely. What did you do to her? What the writers programmed her to respond to, Zhang Wei said, and the bitterness in his own voice surprised him. He looked at Lily, really looked, and saw not a game character, but a person whose deepest fears had been weaponized against her for entertainment. His stomach turned. She was ridden to break when confronted with her own solitude. I just read the script. For a long moment, the ruined plaza was silent except for the distant hum of the arena systems and Lily's ragged breathing. Li Feng's sword hung limp at his side. The scanner showed his internal conflict playing out in real-time data streams, duty to the narrative versus growing awareness of its artificiality, desire to kill Zhang Wei warring with dawning horror at what their world truly was. Zhang Wei used the hesitation. He turned and ran, his injured shoulder screaming with every pounding step. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. The scanner showed him Li Feng making no move to pursue, showed Lily still kneeling in the rubble, her psychological collapse complete. He ran until the plaza was far behind him, until he found shelter in the shell of a collapsed transit station. Sliding down against a cracked tile wall, he stared at his hands. They were shaking. The emotional toll settled over him like a physical weight. He'd just psychologically dismantled two people. Not game characters, people. Their traumas might have been written by some unseen author, but the pain was real. The fear was real. And he'd weaponized it without hesitation, turning their deepest vulnerabilities into tools for his own survival. His morality wasn't just eroding, it was crumbling, washed away by the cold logic of the scanner's data. He was becoming exactly what the game master wanted, a player who understood the narrative so completely that he could manipulate it from within. A villain, not by fate, but by choice. He was still sitting there, staring at nothing, when the broadcast began. It wasn't just in his interface this time. It was everywhere, projected on broken walls, echoing from dead speakers, glowing in the air itself. The game master's voice filled the entire sector, smooth and theatrical. Final showdown, the voice announced, and there was applause in the background, real or simulated, Zhang Wei couldn't tell. Last 5 players remain. Congratulations to our survivors. A pause, heavy with anticipation. Zhang Wei, the game master said, and his name hung in the air like an accusation. Your scanner has been upgraded. It will now reveal every weakness in real time, with perfect clarity. No more hourly shifts. No more glitches. Zhang Wei's interface flickered, then stabilized. The plot glitch scanner expanded, showing him not just the weaknesses of nearby players, but of everyone still alive. Li Feng's guilt complex, mapped in three-dimensional psychological diagrams. Lily's abandonment trauma, displayed with clinical precision. Two other players he hadn't even encountered yet, their deepest fears laid bare like autopsy reports. But there's a catch, the game master continued, and there was laughter in his voice now. So will everyone else's. The words hung in the air for one terrible second. Then Zhang Wei's own weaknesses appeared on his interface, displayed in the same cold, analytical format. Zhang Wei, weakness, growing empathy conflict, shoulder injury, left, psychological fatigue from sustained manipulation, fear of becoming what he exploits. And he knew, with absolute certainty, that every other player was seeing exactly the same thing. His vulnerabilities. His fears. His crumbling morality. All laid bare for his enemies to use against him. The game had just changed forever. The world became a screaming gallery of exposed nerves. Zhang Wei stumbled through the shattered corridor, his shoulder throbbing with each ragged breath. The system's upgrade had completed moments ago, a cold, sterile notification that now echoed in the hollows of his skull. All player weaknesses visible in real time, no more hourly shifts. No more secrets. He didn't need his plot glitch scanner to see it. The data streamed across his vision like a toxic overlay, floating tags above every distant silhouette, glowing with vulnerabilities. Li Feng, guilt over old man Chen's death. Silent Blade, misophobia, crippling fear of contamination. Runebound caster, perfectionist anxiety, rituals must be symmetrical, *. The information was public, broadcast to the 5 remaining players like a shared curse. Chaos erupted almost immediately. From a collapsed atrium to his left, a scream tore through the air, not of pain, but of humiliation. Zhang Wei peered through a cracked viewport. Silent Blade, the stealth assassin, was backing away from Runebound caster, her poisoned daggers trembling. The mage wasn't casting spells. He was meticulously adjusting the alignment of his runic circles, muttering about improper angles, while Silent Blade frantically wiped her blades with a cloth, her eyes wide with germ-phobic terror. They weren't fighting. They were unraveling each other with glances and whispered triggers, caught in a feedback loop of exposed frailties. Zhang Wei. Lin Mei, Crystal Mage, grabbed his arm, her fingers cool against his feverish skin. Her locket glinted at her throat, its sentimental weakness now glowing in his vision like a beacon. Crystal Mage, power tied to locket, shatter it to disable magic, she'd seen it too, her face pale. They know. They all know. And they know we're together, Zhang Wei rasped. His scanner flickered, redundant now, but his mind raced. Public weaknesses changed everything. It wasn't about discovery anymore, it was about prediction. Who would crack first? Who would turn predator? A shadow detached from the ceiling. Kai, the disciple assassin, landed silently beside them, his expression grim. Li Feng is hunting. He's seen your tag. Zhang Wei didn't need to look. He could feel it, the system's cruel reciprocity. His own vulnerability floated in the shared space, visible to all, * Zhang Wei, morality erosion, guilt over psychological manipulation. Physical, persistent shoulder injury, right side. Mental, fatigue from sustained deceit, * it was a blueprint for his destruction. We need to move, Kai said, eyeing the corridor. The control center, the maintenance tunnel I mentioned. It's our only cover. They ran, a ragged trio through the ruins. The sector, once divided by safe zones, was now a single sprawling arena of broken architecture and flickering holographic debris. Every corner held potential ambush. Zhang Wei's experience became his only weapon. He didn't rely on the scanner's data, he anticipated. When Silent Blade lunged from a side passage, her daggers aimed at Lin Mei's locket, Zhang Wei was already shouting. Her cloth is contaminated. She wiped it on mold. It was a lie, but Silent Blade froze, her misophobia spiking. She stared at her own hand, gagging, and Lin Mei seized the opening, crystallizing the air into a barrier that shoved the assassin back. When Runebound Caster appeared on a walkway above, preparing a spell, Zhang Wei didn't read his weakness, he remembered the mage's earlier behavior. Your left rune is 2 millimeters off-center. The mage flinched, his concentration shattering as he glanced down at his casting circle. Kai threw a smoke pellet, and they slipped away. But Li Feng found them anyway. The edgy protagonist emerged from a cloud of dust, his lightning sword crackling. His tracking skill had led him true. His eyes were hard, but Zhang Wei saw the flicker, the guilt tag glowing brighter as Li Feng recognized him. You, Li Feng spat. You turned everything into a joke. No, Zhang Wei said, backing toward a sealed blast door. I turned it into a mirror. Look at yourself, Li Feng. Old man Chen forgave you. The system says you feel guilty. Why? Li Feng's sword wavered. The public weakness was working against him, every hesitation was magnified, every doubt visible. But he was still the protagonist. He rallied, lightning arcing. I'll end this. Kai intercepted, blades clashing. For my master. Lin Mei raised her crystals, but Zhang Wei grabbed her arm. The door, the control center. We can't win this fight. Together, they heaved at the manual override. The blast door groaned open just as Li Feng's lightning seared the ground where they'd stood. They tumbled inside, Kai following, and Zhang Wei slammed the control to seal it. The room beyond was cold, sterile, and humming with energy. Banks of monitors lined the walls, showing feeds from across the sector, the Battle Royale as entertainment. Empty chairs sat before consoles, abandoned by technicians. This was the heart of the illusion, the control center for the reality show. Zhang Wei leaned against a console, his shoulder screaming. The emotional weight of the last hour pressed down, using Kai's loyalty, breaking Lily with abandonment fears, now seeing every player's trauma laid bare. His morality felt like a bruise. I'm exploiting real pain, he thought. And everyone can see I know it. What now? Lin Mei asked, her voice small. Her locket felt heavy in her hand. Zhang Wei stared at the monitors. On one screen, Silent Blade was hyperventilating in a corner, scrubbing her hands raw. On another, Runebound Caster was realigning the same rune repeatedly, trapped in obsessive loops. Li Feng was pounding on the blast door outside, his guilt tag flashing with each strike. The game had become a grotesque exhibition of broken people. We expose it, Zhang Wei said quietly. To them. He gestured at the monitors. Not just us knowing it's a show. The players. The in-game audience. Let them see the comments, the ratings, the truth. Kai frowned. The game master will delete you. He's already trying. Zhang Wei's scanner glitched again, static washing over his vision. The narrative enforcer's nullifying energy had left it unstable. But he didn't need it for this. He accessed a console, his fingers clumsy. His tech resources were minimal, a few hacked codes from earlier logs, some backdoor pathways he'd memorized. It would be a crude, brute force hack. And it would burn out anything he had left. Lin Mei helped, her crystal magic interfacing with the hardware in sparks of light. Kai kept watch at the door, listening to Li Feng's assaults. Sacrificing your last advantages? Lin Mei asked softly. They're already gone, Zhang Wei said. The public weaknesses had seen to that. All he had left was the truth, and the damage it could do. He initiated the hack. Lines of code scrolled, warnings flashing red. The system resisted, but he pushed, channeling every bit of his understanding from the server room logs. This wasn't about subtlety. It was about overload. He rerouted broadcast feeds, tapped into viewer data streams, forced the reality show's backend into the foreground. On the main monitor, the battle feeds flickered. Then they changed. Li Feng's enraged face was replaced by a flood of text, live viewer comments scrolling fast. Asterisk, this season's twist is boring. Make them fight already. Asterisk. Asterisk, who cares about guilt? I paid for lightning swords. Asterisk. Asterisk, the morality erosion tag on Zhang Wei is hilarious, he's such a villain. Asterisk. Asterisk, cancel subscription if Berserker Queen doesn't return. Asterisk. Across the sector, on every surviving player's interface, the comments appeared. Silent Blade stopped scrubbing, reading about her misophobia being quaint. Runebound Caster paused his ritual, seeing his perfectionism mocked as OCD theater. Outside the blast door, Li Feng's pounding ceased. A feed showed him staring at his own hands, comments about his guilt floating past, Protagonist needs to get over it. Old man Chen was a weak plot device anyway. The truth was out. Not as a revelation, but as a barrage of cruelty. The players saw themselves as entertainment, their traumas, their fears, their struggles reduced to spectator sport. Zhang Wei slumped, the hack complete. His tech resources were spent, his scanner dark. He felt hollow, his shoulder a dull ache. But on the monitors, chaos was blooming. Players weren't fighting, they were staring, screaming at the sky, tearing at their own interfaces. Then the air in the control center shimmered. A holographic figure coalesced in the center of the room, tall, impeccably dressed in a suit that seemed woven from static, features sharp and devoid of warmth. The Game Master. His presence sucked the sound from the room, leaving only the hum of machinery. He looked at Zhang Wei, and his voice was calm, precise, and utterly venomous. You've ruined the ratings. Lin Mei stepped back, crystals forming defensively. Kai raised his blades. Zhang Wei just stared, too exhausted to feel fear. The Game Master's holographic form solidified further, fingers flexing as if testing reality. The audience is complaining. The narrative is broken. You were supposed to be a subtle anomaly, Zhang Wei. A writing team prospect. But this? He gestured to the scrolling comments. This is noise. He took a step forward, and the floor plates trembled. Not a hologram anymore, something more. A manifestation with weight, with intent. Time for a hands-on deletion. The Game Master raised a hand, and the very air began to crackle with nullifying energy, the same force that had glitched the narrative enforcer. It reached for Zhang Wei, slow and inevitable. And in that moment, with no scanner, no tech, and his weaknesses exposed to all, Zhang Wei could only watch as the system's master decided to end the story himself. The holographic figure solidified into a man in an immaculate silver suit, his features sharp and ageless. The Game Master didn't walk, he simply appeared where he intended to be, the air around him shimmering with distorted reality. Zhang Wei felt the pressure before the attack came, a wave of spatial compression that made his injured shoulder scream in protest. You've ruined my masterpiece, the Game Master said, his voice smooth as polished glass yet carrying the weight of collapsing dimensions. Do you know what happens when ratings drop? He gestured, and the control center's walls began to fold inward, metal groaning like a dying beast. Zhang Wei's plot glitch scanner flickered erratically in his vision, struggling against the Game Master's reality-warping aura. Glitches danced across his perception, static, corrupted data streams, error messages in languages that didn't exist. He stumbled back, blood from his shoulder wound soaking through makeshift bandages. Lin Mei raised her crystal shield, but it cracked under the spatial pressure, shards tinkling to the floor. Kai moved with assassin's grace, daggers flashing toward the holographic form. The blades passed through without resistance, and the Game Master smiled, a cold, calculated expression. Physical attacks. How quaint. He snapped his fingers, and Kai's weapons dissolved into pixels, reforming as butterflies that fluttered harmlessly away. Scanner, work, damn you, Zhang Wei muttered through gritted teeth. His mental fatigue felt like lead weights chained to his thoughts. The upgrade that had made all weaknesses visible now seemed useless against this entity who controlled reality itself. But as the Game Master prepared another attack, reality itself beginning to pixelate at the edges, the scanner finally stabilized. A single line of text appeared, stark against the glitching background. Game Master, weakness, obsession with viewer approval, negative feedback cripples him. Zhang Wei's eyes widened. The smug figure before him, this godlike entity who could reshape matter with a thought, was vulnerable to the very thing he'd just exposed, the audience's judgment. Lin Mei. The broadcast. Zhang Wei shouted, ducking as a section of ceiling collapsed where he'd been standing. Flood it with everything we have. The crystal mage didn't hesitate. Her hands flew across the hacked console, fingers dancing over controls that still flickered with the ghostly afterimages of viewer comments. She pulled up every negative review, every mocking comment, every piece of criticism that had poured in after Zhang Wei's hack had exposed the reality show's cruelty. On screens throughout the control center, and presumably across whatever broadcast reached the outside world, words began to scroll. Asterisk, boring finale. Game Master's losing his touch. Asterisk. Asterisk, predictable villain reveal. Seen this plot 100 times. Asterisk. Asterisk, rating this season 2 out of 10. Last season was better. Asterisk. Asterisk, Game Master's suit looks cheap. Is that off the rack? Asterisk. Asterisk, reality warping powers. So derivative. Asterisk. The effect was immediate. The Game Master staggered as if struck. His perfect composure cracked, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his ageless features. What is this?" he whispered, his voice losing its smooth certainty. "Your audience," Zhang Wei said, rising to his feet despite the pain. "They're not impressed." More comments scrolled, faster now. Asterisk, deleting players for low ratings. How desperate. Asterisk. Asterisk, Game Master's monologue needs work. Too cliché. Asterisk. Asterisk, worst season finale ever. Demanding refund. Asterisk. With each line, the Game Master's reality warping aura flickered. The folding walls stuttered, returning partially to their original positions before wavering again. The air lost its oppressive weight. His silver suit seemed less immaculate, the fabric appearing slightly frayed at the edges. "No," the Game Master murmured, his hands coming up to clutch at his temples. "The metrics, the engagement numbers." Zhang Wei pressed the advantage. "They think you're losing your touch. That this whole Battle Royale has become predictable. That you're not the master storyteller you pretend to be." Each word was a psychological scalpel, carefully chosen based on what the scanner revealed. This entity's entire existence was tied to audience approval. His power, his reality warping abilities, his very sense of self, all depended on being admired, feared, respected. Criticism wasn't just feedback, it was existential erosion. "Enough," the Game Master roared, but the command lacked its earlier conviction. He raised a hand to unleash another attack, but the spatial distortion around his fingers sputtered and died. The screens showed more comments. Asterisk, Game Master's having a meltdown on camera. How unprofessional. Asterisk. Asterisk, this is cringe. Changing channels. Asterisk. Asterisk, viewership dropping by 40%. New record low. Asterisk. His control nodes. Kai shouted, pointing to crystalline structures that had materialized around the Game Master, glowing orbs that pulsed with the same reality warping energy. "They're vulnerable." Lin Mei didn't need prompting. She focused her crystal magic, not on the Game Master himself, but on the nearest node. A spear of pure crystallized energy shot from her hands, striking the orb dead center. It shattered with a sound like breaking glass, and the Game Master cried out, a genuine sound of pain. Zhang Wei moved toward another node, his movements clumsy with fatigue. His mind felt scraped raw, every thought an effort. The psychological warfare he'd been waging for days, the constant calculation, the erosion of his own morality, it all weighed on him now. But he pushed forward, grabbing a piece of fallen conduit and swinging it at the second node. The metal struck true. The node exploded in a shower of light, and the Game Master's form flickered, becoming momentarily transparent. You don't understand." He gasped, his voice now thin and reedy. "Without the ratings, without the approval. I'm nothing." "Exactly," Zhang Wei said, breathing heavily. He could feel his mental fortitude draining away, the last reserves of willpower being spent on staying upright. "You built your entire existence around being watched. Around being praised. And now they're laughing at you." He nodded to Lin Mei, who targeted a third node. Kai took the fourth. With each destruction, the Game Master diminished. His silver suit lost its luster, becoming ordinary fabric. His ageless features showed lines of stress. The reality warping aura faded completely, leaving him standing as just a man, a desperate, broken man clinging to his crumbling domain. When the final node shattered, the Game Master collapsed to his knees. The control center stopped its spatial distortions entirely. Screens went dark, then rebooted to show only static. "It's over," Zhang Wei said, the words tasting like ash. He leaned against a console, his shoulder screaming with fresh pain. The mental exhaustion was complete now, he could barely form coherent thoughts. The plot glitch scanner in his vision had gone completely dark, drained along with everything else. Then footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Li Feng entered the control center, his lightning sword sheathed at his side. The edgy protagonist looked different, the constant anger that had defined him was gone, replaced by a grim determination. He didn't raise his weapon. Didn't assume a fighting stance. He looked at the kneeling game master, then at Zhang Wei, his eyes taking in the blood, the exhaustion, the sheer weariness of the man who should have died in Chapter 3. "We need to talk," Li Feng said, his voice quiet but firm. "Not as protagonist and villain. Not as hunter and prey." He took a step forward, hands open and empty. "I've seen what this game does. What it turns us into. What it turned me into." Zhang Wei stared, too tired to even feel surprise. "What are you saying?" "That thing you showed us," Li Feng continued, gesturing to the dark screens that had displayed the audience's cruel commentary. "The reality show. The viewers laughing at our pain. My guilt over old man Chen." He swallowed, the memory clearly painful. "You were right. About all of it." The game master looked up from where he knelt, a spark of his old arrogance returning. "You can't shut it down. The system is self-sustaining. The Battle Royale will continue with or without me." "Maybe," Li Feng said, his eyes never leaving Zhang Wei's. "But maybe we don't have to play by its rules anymore. Maybe we write our own ending." He extended a hand, not in attack, but in offering. "Truce," Li Feng said. "Help me shut this down for good. Not for survival. Not for victory. Because it's the right thing to do." Zhang Wei looked at the hand, then at his own blood-stained fingers. The man who had weaponized traumas, who had eroded his morality to survive, who had become the very thing he'd fought against. The mental fatigue was absolute now, he had nothing left to give. No more psychological manipulations. No more clever tricks. Just a choice. Around them, the control center lay in ruins. The game master knelt broken. The Battle Royale's final act awaited its conclusion. And the protagonist who was destined to kill him was offering peace. The control center hummed with dying energy, flickering holographic screens casting ghostly blue light across the faces of the 5 survivors. Zhang Wei leaned against a shattered console, his shoulder throbbing with a dull persistence that had become background noise to the deeper exhaustion gnawing at his mind. His plot glitch scanner, once his greatest weapon, lay dormant in his consciousness, drained completely after the confrontation with the game master. Now he had only human intuition and the cold calculus of survival. Li Feng stood across the ruined chamber, his lightning sword sheathed but his posture tense. The edgy protagonist's eyes held none of their usual predatory focus, instead, they reflected the same hollow realization Zhang Wei felt, that everything they'd fought through had been entertainment for unseen viewers. Crystal Mage, Lin Mei, clutched her locket, the crystal fragments around her trembling with unstable magic. Beside her, Kai, the stealth assassin seeking revenge against Li Feng, watched the former enemy with wary calculation. And in the corner, Lily, the berserker queen, hugged her knees, her rage aura flickering like a dying flame. "We don't have time for standoffs," Zhang Wei said, his voice rough. "The game master's weakened, but he's not finished. He'll throw everything left at us." As if summoned by his words, the control center's main display flickered to life. The game master's holographic form appeared, now fractured and glitching, but his voice carried the same theatrical malice. "Congratulations on surviving my personal attention. But the show must go on, and the finale requires a proper cast." The floor shuddered. From the corridors beyond, figures emerged, dozens of them, moving with identical mechanical precision. They wore featureless gray uniforms, their faces blank masks without eyes or mouths. The blank slates. Customized hunters with no known weaknesses, no traumas to exploit, no secrets to whisper. They advanced in perfect unison, weapons humming with lethal energy. "Form up." Li Feng barked, his tracking skill activating instinctively. "Zhang Wei, direct us. Your scanner may be dead, but you know how we think." Zhang Wei's mind raced. The system upgrade from Chapter 10 meant every player's weaknesses were publicly visible, floating like ghostly text above their heads. He didn't need the scanner to see them now, they were etched into the air for all to read. Lily's, abandonment trauma, fears being alone. Li Feng's, guilt over old man Chen's death, hesitates when reminded. Lin Mei's, sentimental attachment to locket, magic destabilizes if separated. Kai's, obsessive revenge focus, blind to other threats. And his own, hovering above him like a condemnation, morality erosion, vulnerable to empathy attacks. "Lily!" Zhang Wei shouted. "Your rage, don't let it control you. Control it. We need you focused, not broken." The berserker queen looked up, her eyes wide with panic. "I can't, I'm alone. You're not alone, Zhang Wei cut in, his voice sharp. We're here. Use the anger, but aim it. They're just puppets. Nothing to fear. Something shifted in Lily's expression. The flickering rage aura solidified into a crimson corona around her. She stood, her muscles coiling. For once, she whispered, someone stayed. She launched herself at the nearest blank slate, her fists shattering its featureless mask in an explosion of kinetic force. The other hunters turned toward her, but Li Feng was already moving, his lightning sword carving arcs of blue energy through their ranks. He fought with a new precision, not the reckless aggression of before, but a measured, almost mournful violence. Every time he hesitated, Zhang Wei saw the guilt text flare brighter above his head. Li Feng. Zhang Wei called. Old man Chen forgave you. He chose to. Remember that choice. The protagonist's blade didn't falter this time. Instead, it moved faster, the lightning burning hotter. He channeled the guilt into focus, turning remorse into ruthless efficiency. Blank slates fell around him like harvested wheat. Lin Mei raised her hands, crystals forming from the air. But they wavered, threatening to shatter. She clutched her locket tighter. I can't maintain the spells. Don't hold the locket, Zhang Wei said, his mind working through the public weaknesses. Let it go. The magic isn't in the object, it's in you. The locket's just a crutch. The crystal mage's fingers trembled. Then, with a breath, she released the locket, letting it dangle from its chain. The crystal stabilized, growing sharper, deadlier. She sent a volley of shards into the advancing hunters, piercing armor with surgical precision. Kai moved like a shadow, his poison daggers finding gaps in the blank slate's defenses. But he focused solely on protecting Li Feng's flank, ignoring other threats. A hunter lunged at him from behind. Kai, watch your six. Zhang Wei yelled. The assassin spun, gutting the attacker, but his eyes stayed fixed on Li Feng. The revenge obsession blinded him, a flaw Zhang Wei noted but couldn't fix now. They fought as a unit, an uneasy alliance forged in desperation. Zhang Wei directed from the rear, his own weakness, the morality erosion, gnawing at him. Every command felt like another step into darkness. He was weaponizing their traumas again, turning human pain into combat efficiency. But survival demanded it. Together, they carved a path through the blank slates, their coordination growing tighter with each fallen hunter. Lily's rage became a controlled storm, Li Feng's guilt a sharpened blade, Lin Mei's sentimentality a focused will. Even Kai's obsession served as relentless protection. They reached a sealed door at the chamber's far end, the entrance to the core server room, according to the schematics flashing on broken screens. Breach it. Li Feng ordered. Lily slammed her fists against the reinforced metal, the impact echoing like a bell. On the third strike, the door crumpled inward, revealing a cavernous space beyond. The core server room stretched into darkness, illuminated only by the pulsating light of massive data columns rising from floor to ceiling. In the center, the Game Master's physical form stood connected to the main console by tendrils of glowing energy. He looked up as they entered, his face a mask of fury and fractured pride. You think this changes anything? The Game Master spat. You've exposed the truth. The audience loved it. Ratings peaked during your little breakdown broadcast. Zhang Wei ignored him, his eyes scanning the room. His plot glitch scanner stirred weakly, a phantom pain behind his eyes. It tried to activate, to analyze the Game Master's remaining weaknesses, but it was like trying to light a dead bulb. The effort sent a sharp migraine spiking through his skull. He staggered, clutching his temple. Zhang Wei. Lin Mei asked, her crystals forming a defensive ring. Scanners trying to reboot, he gritted out. It's overloading. Every pulse of pain felt like a drain on his already depleted health. His vision blurred at the edges. The shoulder injury flared in sympathy. He was running on fumes, his mental fatigue now a tangible weight dragging him down. The Game Master laughed, a hollow, echoing sound. Your cheat is broken, little glitch. And so are you. He raised a hand. But since you've come this far, let's give the viewers one last spectacle. His fingers danced across the console. The data columns flared brighter, their light turning crimson. A countdown appeared on every screen in the room, mirrored on the walls in glowing digits, 300 seconds. 299, 298. Self-destruct sequence activated, the Game Master announced, his voice booming through hidden speakers. The sector will implode. All data, including your pathetic lives, will be purged. Li Feng lunged, his lightning sword aimed at the Game Master's heart. But the tendrils of energy lashed out, deflecting the blow. Lily charged, her rage aura blazing, but the Game Master gestured, and force fields shimmered into existence, boxing them in. Lin Mei's crystals shattered against the barriers. Kai's daggers bounced off harmlessly. Focus on the servers. Zhang Wei shouted through the migraine's haze. Destroy the data columns, it's his power source. They redirected their attacks. Lily's fists cratered the nearest column, sending sparks flying. Li Feng's lightning arced through another, overloading its circuits. Lin Mei concentrated her magic, crystalline spikes piercing multiple servers at once. Kai slipped through gaps in the defenses, planting explosive charges at the bases of the columns. The Game Master screamed, a raw, inhuman sound. You ruin everything. The countdown continued, 120 seconds. 119. Zhang Wei's scanner gave one final, agonizing pulse. For a split second, it showed him the Game Master's weakness again, clearer than ever, obsession with viewer approval, vulnerable to audience rejection. But the image shattered into static, and the migraine exploded into a white-hot agony that dropped him to his knees. He felt something vital sap from him, his health plummeting. Blood trickled from his nose. The last data column exploded under their combined assault. The Game Master's physical form convulsed, the energy tendrils snapping. He collapsed against the console, his body flickering like a bad transmission. But the countdown didn't stop. 60 seconds. 59. The Game Master looked up, his laughter returning, thin and wheezing. Even if you win, the sector implodes. No one survives. The digits glowed red against the darkness, 60 seconds until annihilation. The core server room hummed with the frantic energy of impending annihilation. Red emergency lights painted the towering data columns in bloody hues, their surfaces flickering with the countdown that now read 60 seconds. Zhang Wei's migraine pulsed behind his eyes like a second heartbeat, each throb sapping what little strength remained in his battered body. His shoulder screamed with every movement, a constant reminder of his mortality in this digital hellscape. Around him, his unlikely allies stood ready. Li Feng's lightning sword crackled with restrained energy, his face a mask of grim determination where once there had been only arrogant certainty. Crystal Mage, Lin Mei, clutched her locket not with sentimental weakness, but with fierce resolve, her crystal magic forming shimmering barriers around the group. Kai moved with lethal grace, poison daggers ready, his eyes never leaving Li Feng's back even as he protected it. And Lily, the Berserker Queen, breathed deeply, her rage aura contained through sheer will, her real name now a source of strength rather than vulnerability. The Game Master's holographic form flickered near the central console, his features twisted into a sneer. 59, he whispered, the sound echoing through the metallic chamber. 58. Your pathetic alliance cannot stop what has been written. Zhang Wei ignored him. He staggered toward the primary interface, his movements clumsy with exhaustion. His plot glitch scanner had died completely during the overload attempt, no comforting whispers of weaknesses, no passive revelations. Just silence in his mind, broken only by the pounding headache and the relentless countdown. But he didn't need the scanner here. He remembered the novel. The original story he transmigrated into, the trash villain's early death, the Battle Royale's predictable beats. In the final chapters he'd skimmed before waking up here, there had been a throwaway line about emergency protocols. A hidden backdoor in the system's code, mentioned only once when the protagonist faced a similar crisis in a later arc. 45 seconds, the Game Master announced, his voice gaining strength. The data columns will overload. The sector will implode. You will all become nothing but entertainment for the final broadcast. Zhang Wei's fingers flew across the interface. The system responded sluggishly, damaged by their earlier attacks. He bypassed security protocols using codes he remembered from the novel's descriptions, passwords that shouldn't work in this twisted version, but did because the core architecture remained the same. What are you doing? Li Feng demanded, moving to his side. The original story had a failsafe, Zhang Wei grunted, sweat dripping into his eyes. A backdoor for system administrators. If I can find it. 30 seconds. The interface shifted. Layers of code scrolled past, incomprehensible to anyone without his meta-knowledge. He saw it then, a sequence buried deep in the emergency protocols. Not a glitch in the traditional sense, but a deliberate override built into the system's foundation. A way to cancel catastrophic failures. Li Feng, Zhang Wei said, his voice strained. I need you to input these codes simultaneously. Your tracking skill, the precision. The protagonist didn't hesitate. He sheathed his sword and placed his hands on secondary terminals. Tell me. Zhang Wei recited strings of characters, numbers, and symbols. Li Feng's fingers moved with unnatural speed, each input perfect. Around them, the others formed a defensive perimeter. Lin Mei's crystals shattered against incoming energy pulses from the Game Master's flickering form. Kai's daggers found their marks in holographic projections that solidified just enough to be tangible. Lily roared, her controlled rage creating shockwaves that disrupted the digital attacks. 20 seconds. The back door activated. A new interface bloomed across every screen in the room, a simple prompt with two options, terminate self-destruct and confirm override. It requires a data surge, Zhang Wei realized, reading the fine code scrolling beneath the prompt. Massive processing power. It'll try to pull from whatever consciousness is linked to the system. Li Feng met his eyes. We'll both do it. No, Zhang Wei pushed him back. Your guilt, your focus. You need to be clear-headed if this works. I'm already broken. It was true. His mental fatigue had reached critical levels back in Chapter 12. The migraine was just the physical manifestation. His morality had eroded so far he could weaponize traumas without flinching. What was one more sacrifice? 15 seconds. Zhang Wei placed both hands on the main terminal. He didn't have any special skills left, no scanner, no tech resources, just the knowledge of a novel he'd read and the desperation of someone who refused to die as trash. The system connected to his consciousness. It was like drowning in ice and fire simultaneously. Data streams flooded his mind, not just numbers and code, but memories. The Game Master's memories. Centuries of orchestrating battles, manipulating players, feeding on audience reactions. The sheer weight of it should have shattered Zhang Wei completely. But he'd already been shattered. He pushed back. Not with strength, but with understanding. He saw the patterns, how the Game Master had grown obsessed with ratings, how he'd started altering narratives to boost engagement, how he'd become a slave to the very entertainment he created. Zhang Wei weaponized this knowledge, not as an attack, but as a key. 10 seconds. The countdown stalled. The numbers froze on 10. The red lights ceased their frantic flashing. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then the Game Master screamed. It wasn't a sound of pain, but of rage so profound it vibrated through the server room's very structure. His holographic form dissolved into streams of data that swirled around the central console. The data columns glowed with unnatural light, their surfaces cracking as energy pulsed within. You think you've won? The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. You think your pathetic override can stop me? The streams coalesced. Not into a human form this time, but something monstrous. A digital entity composed of flickering code and stolen memories, with too many limbs and eyes that glowed with system warnings. It towered over them, its form shifting constantly, one moment a beast of claws and teeth, the next a swirling vortex of corrupted data. I built this system, the monster roared, its voice layered with 1,000 viewer comments, mocking laughter, and the screams of dead players. I wrote every story. I controlled every outcome. Zhang Wei stumbled back from the terminal, his nose bleeding from the mental strain. He could feel the override holding, the self-destruct sequence remained frozen at 10 seconds. But the cost? His thoughts moved through molasses. Simple concepts, names, faces, why he was here, slipped through his grasp like smoke. Li Feng's lightning sword flared to life. What is it? He's merged with the system, Zhang Wei managed, each word an effort. Become, part of the code. The digital monster lunged. Not with physical force, but with reality-warping attacks. The floor beneath Kai's feet turned to quicksand of pixels. The air around Lin Mei solidified into crystal prisons that mirrored her own magic. Lily's rage aura flickered as childhood abandonment memories, her weakness, flooded her mind through direct neural intrusion. Li Feng moved faster than thought. His sword cut through data streams, severing connections. Where lightning met code, the system glitched, brief moments of vulnerability. His weakness. Lin Mei cried, shattering her own crystal prisons with a burst of will. The scanner revealed it, obsession with viewer approval. The broadcast is dead, Kai snarled, pulling himself from the pixel quicksand. We destroyed the feed. Zhang Wei's fading mind grasped at the concept. Not approval. Control. The game master needed to control the narrative. Every manipulation, every twist, all to maintain his authority over the story. And Zhang Wei had just rewritten his code. The monster turned its multitude of eyes on him. "You," it hissed. "The anomaly. The glitch I should have deleted in Chapter 3. "You can't delete me," Zhang Wei said, the words coming easier now as he understood. "Because I'm not in your story anymore. I'm writing my own." He didn't have the plot glitch scanner. He didn't have any cheat abilities left. But he had something better, the truth he'd exposed back in the control center. The reality shows nature. The audience's cruelty. The game master's fundamental flaw, he'd become what he created. "The override is holding," Zhang Wei told the others, his voice gaining strength even as his mind continued to fray. "But he's part of the system now. To stop him completely." The digital monster roared again, its form expanding. Code tendrils shot out, aiming for the data columns. "If I cannot have my story," it bellowed, "then I will become the story." It wasn't a threat. It was a transformation. The monster's form dissolved entirely, flowing into the data columns. The frozen countdown at 10 began to flicker, not resuming, but changing. The numbers morphed into words, Chapter 14. Then, rewriting the code. The server room itself began to shift. Walls dissolved into scrolling text. The floor became a page of narrative description. The air thickened with the scent of ink and old paper. Li Feng's lightning sword sputtered. "What's happening?" "He's literalizing it," Zhang Wei realized with dawning horror. Making the metaphor real. The Battle Royale was always a story. Now he's becoming the text itself. From the central column, a new form emerged. Still monstrous, but different. A creature of living parchment and glowing words, with chapter titles for scales and character descriptions swirling in its eyes. Where it moved, reality rewrote itself. Kai became the vengeful assassin, in truth, his movements constrained by archetype. Lin Mei's crystals turned to sentimental magic that weakened with every use. Only Lily resisted, her rage burning too hot for neat narrative boxes. Only Zhang Wei stood unaffected, because he'd always been outside the story. The creature, the story monster, looked at them with authorial disdain. "Every hero needs a villain," it said, its voice the turning of pages. "Every conflict needs resolution. I will write your endings personally." It raised a hand of crinkling parchment. The words, "Final Battle," formed in the air, solidifying into physical barriers. Zhang Wei met Li Feng's eyes. The protagonist nodded once. No truce needed anymore, just understanding. "The back door," Zhang Wei said. "It's still active. But it needs." He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Li Feng understood. The override required a consciousness linked to the system. Zhang Wei had done it first, but his mind was failing. To complete the shutdown, to erase the game master completely from the code, would require someone else to take his place. And it would cost them everything. The story monther laughed, the sound like a book slamming shut. "Make your choice, anomalies. Become characters in my climax, or fade to nothing." Around them, the server room completed its transformation. They stood not in a technological chamber, but in the pages of a novel. The very words of this chapter surrounded them, describing their every move even as they made it. And in the distance, barely audible over the rustle of infinite pages, the frozen countdown at 10 began to beep again. Reality screamed. The air in the server room didn't just shimmer, it tore, pixels bleeding into flesh, code rewriting stone. The game master was gone, replaced by something that hung in the space between monitors like a cancerous god. The story monster. It had no true form, only shifting impressions, one moment a towering knight of glitching armor, the next a swarm of screaming faces stolen from dead players' memories, then a vast eye that pulsed with the rhythm of dying narratives. Zhang Wei stumbled back, his vision swimming. The migraine from the scanner overload was a white-hot spike driven through his temples. His shoulder screamed where Grimdal's axe had bitten deep chapters ago, a pain he'd learned to ignore until now, when every nerve felt flayed raw. Beside him, Li Feng raised his lightning sword, the blade crackling with unstable energy. Lin Mei's crystals formed a brittle shield around them, already cracking under the monster's reality-warping gaze. Kai and Lily stood ready, but their expressions showed the same dawning horror. This wasn't a fight they could win with blades or rage. Then, without willing it, Zhang Wei's mind flared. The plot glitch scanner, silent and dead since the overload, flickered once in his consciousness like a dying ember. It didn't reboot, didn't flood him with data, it simply delivered one final, crystalline insight, burning itself out completely in the process. The knowledge seared into him. Game monster, transformed game master. Weakness, reliant on viewer belief. Disbelief unravels it, ***. Zhang Wei almost laughed. Of course. The monster was made of story, of narrative, of the audience's hungry eyes. It fed on their attention, their suspension of disbelief. Without that, it was just corrupted code. The broadcast, he croaked, his voice ragged. The hacked feed, is it still active? Lin Mei, her fingers trembling as she reinforced her crystal shield, nodded. The system's damaged, but the outgoing signal. I think it still live. To the whole viewing sphere. Around them, the story monster flexed. The floor became liquid plotlines, tendrils of rewritten reality snaking toward them. Li Feng slashed with his lightning sword, severing a tendril that dissolved into static, but two more grew in its place. The monster's form solidified into a giant, multi-limbed beast composed of flickering screens, each showing a different moment of torture from the Battle Royale, Grimdal's knee giving way, Silent Blade's misophobic panic, the Berserker Queen's rage turning to tears at her real name. It was weaponizing their own victories against them. We can't fight this thing, Kai hissed, his daggers useless against the ephemeral horror. It's not real. It's real because they believe it is, Zhang Wei said, the idea cohering through the pain. He looked at Li Feng. I need the broadcast. I need to talk to them. All of them. Li Feng hesitated for only a second. Then he nodded, his edgy demeanor replaced by grim resolve. Do it. I'll buy you time. He charged forward, his lightning sword carving arcs of purifying energy through the monster's form. Where the blade passed, the glitching flesh hesitated, as if unsure whether to exist. Lily roared, her rage aura flaring not with blind fury but focused protection, holding back a wave of memory shards that threatened to engulf Zhang Wei. Lin Mei's crystals redirected, forming a fragile conduit toward a half-shattered console. Zhang Wei stumbled to the console, his fingers clumsy with exhaustion. The interface was alien, a mess of broken code, but the scanner's final gift had left an imprint. He understood the system's skeleton. He found the audio channel, still live, still transmitting to billions of viewers across the entertainment spheres who were watching this final showdown, hungry for a dramatic conclusion. He opened the channel. Took a breath that felt like swallowing glass. You, he said, his voice amplified, echoing through the ruined server room and out into the void of space where the audience watched. All of you watching. You think this is entertainment? A story? The story monster recoiled, its form shuddering. It lunged toward him, but Li Feng intercepted, his blade meeting a claw of solidified narrative. The clash sent sparks of data flying. Zhang Wei continued, pouring every ounce of his remaining will into his words. Look at it. This monster. It's made of your belief. You watch us suffer, you cheer for heroes, you boo villains, and you make it real. But I'm telling you now, none of this is real. It's a construct. A lie. The game master manipulated you, fed you narratives, and you ate them up. But you have the power to stop it. Right now. He gestured at the monster, which was now twisting in agony, parts of its body beginning to pixelate and dissolve. See that? It weakens when you doubt. When you reject the story. This isn't a battle royale, it's a torture chamber dressed up as a show. And you're the ones holding the keys. On the monitors that weren't shattered, Zhang Wei saw the viewership numbers, once in the billions, begin to plummet. First by thousands, then millions. The audience was turning off, logging out, rejecting the feed. The monster screamed, a sound like a million corrupted files deleting at once. Its form became translucent, insubstantial. Now, Li Feng. Zhang Wei shouted. Li Feng didn't hesitate. He raised his lightning sword high, and for the first time, the blade shone with pure, unwavering light, no guilt over past betrayals, no edge of anger, just clean purpose. He had accepted his role, not as a novel's protagonist, but as a man making a choice. He brought the sword down in a perfect arc, not at the monster's heart, but at the central core of glitching code that pulsed within it. The blade connected. Reality held its breath. Then, silence. The monster didn't explode. It unraveled. Like a tapestry cut at the threads, it dissolved into streams of harmless light, then into nothing. The warping of the room ceased, the floor became solid, the air still. The last of the monitors went dark. The system, with a final shuddering sigh, crashed completely. Zhang Wei collapsed against the console, his legs giving out. The plot glitch scanner in his mind didn't just go dormant, it faded, like a dream upon waking. Its purpose was fulfilled. No fanfare, no resource cost. Just emptiness where a cheat had been. Around him, the others stood in stunned silence. The Battle Royale was over. Zhang Wei awoke to soft light. He was lying on a clean cot in a neutral zone, a plain, white room with no decorations, no threats. His shoulder was bandaged, the pain reduced to a dull ache. His mind felt quiet. The catastrophic mental fatigue was gone, replaced by a deep, weary clarity. He sat up slowly. Outside the room, he could hear voices. Lin Mei, laughing softly with Lily. Kai speaking in low tones with Li Feng. They were alive. All of them. A door slid open, and a system attendant, a benign AI with a neutral face, entered. Zhang Wei. You are cleared. The Battle Royale has been terminated. All remaining players have been extracted and are undergoing evaluation. You are hailed as the player who outsmarted the game. Zhang Wei nodded, feeling no triumph, only the weight of his actions. He had weaponized traumas, turned weaknesses into weapons, manipulated friends and foes alike. He had survived, but at what cost? The morality that had once anchored him felt distant, eroded by necessity. He stood, testing his balance. He was weak, but whole. He walked out of the room into a common area where the others waited. They looked at him with expressions mixed with gratitude, wariness, and respect. No one spoke. What was there to say? Zhang Wei offered a faint smile, then turned and walked away, down a long, sterile corridor toward an exit. The others let him go. He needed no farewells. As he reached the exit arch, a new prompt flickered before his eyes, not from the dead Battle Royale system, but from something deeper, older. Words formed in crisp, unadorned text. Novel world reset. New plot detected, Zhang Wei, the psychological villain, becomes the protagonist of a sequel, ****. Zhang Wei paused. He looked at the words, then out at the neutral landscape beyond, a blank slate waiting for a story. A slow, genuine smile touched his lips. He had never wanted power. He had never wanted to be a hero or a villain. He had only wanted to understand the rules, and then bend them. The plot glitch scanner was gone, but its lesson remained: everyone had a weakness, a secret, a story. And he knew how to read them all. His cheat was never about power. It was about understanding people. And that was a skill that never expired. He stepped through the arch, into the unknown, still smiling.